The Prime Minister still hanging on to power after 46 resignations from his government.
A very good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Thursday, the 7th of July. This is Breakfast on GB News today with Eamonn, Holmes and me, Rosie Wright. Well, here's what's leading the news this morning.
The Prime Minister remains in power this morning after a wave of high-profile resignations and a standoff with his own cabinet ministers.
Last night, he sacked the Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove for disloyalty after he briefed the press that the Prime Minister had to go. Other key allies of Johnson held crisis talks in Number 10 last night, with the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, also telling the Prime Minister his time was up.
Speaking in front of the Liaison Committee yesterday, he hinted that if Conservative MPs forced him out, he would call a snap general election.
What do you make of all of this? A bruising day. That's an understatement for Boris Johnson. You can join any of our discussions. Email us, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us as well at gbnews.
Well, it has to be said, though, you have been in touch, and the reason you've been in touch is a lot of you cast your votes, an awful lot of you cast your votes at the Television Radio Industry Club Awards, which are very prestigious and held at London's Grosvenor Hotel, Park Lane, yesterday. And the newscaster of the year, and I'm so embarrassed to say this, from you to me, went to me. Thank you very much indeed. It'll not please all of you, but you know what it shows? It shows that you're invested in this station, you care about this station, you like what we're doing. We're trying to do it differently. We're trying to involve you. We're trying to make it the people's channel. And from me to you, this is not just for me, of course. This is for Rosie, this is for Isabel, this is for everybody who works in the team, everybody who's behind that plate of glass behind us there, who puts all of this together, who speak in our ears. And it's been a real shot in the arm for the whole team. And bear in mind, I mean, I've been doing this for 6 months. The channel's been on air for less than a year, about just a year. And there we are. We're winning awards. So the future looks bright. The future looks like Rosie Wright. Looks orange. That's it.
Very orange, but not as shiny as this.
Thank you very much indeed. Thanks very much. So our top story this morning is that the Prime Minister remains in power after an unprecedented 46 resignations from the government last night, and senior cabinet ministers, including Priti Patel and Grant Shapps, met with him to urge him to stand down.
Now, the Prime Minister then, late last night, sacked Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove in a shock move, with a Downing Street source calling former Boris Johnson ally a snake. Speaking in front of the Liaison Committee yesterday afternoon, it has to be described as defiant Boris Johnson appeared to hint he would call a snap general election if he was forced out of Number 10.
You're asking about something that is not going to happen, unless everybody's so crazy as to try and have a new. We are going to get on. I don't think the people of this country want to have an election, and I certainly don't.
Right, for more on all of this, let's go to Downing Street Live. Our political commentator Tom Harwood must feel as if he lives there, and he's got the very latest this morning. Tom, good morning.
Good morning, Eamonn. It was a day of absolute high drama yesterday. It's almost impossible to try and keep track of all of the twists and turns in what turned out to be a tale that has really had no precedent in British politics before. We've seen Prime Ministers come and go. We've seen attempts to remove Prime Ministers, but none as long-lasting as what happened yesterday. Of course, cabinet ministers, junior ministers, parliamentary private secretaries and indeed even trade envoys expressing their discontent with government, going at such a rate in such numbers that it's going to be incredibly difficult for the Prime Minister to backfill all of these posts. Indeed, some suggestions, with a slight smile from people inside Number 10, that this is an opportunity to slim down government. To some extent, it seemed yesterday that what was going on in the minds of people running Number 10 was a parallel universe in terms of what was going on in the rest of Westminster, seeing the Prime Minister sit there and sort of answer questions in a relatively normal way about defence policy and everything else at the time at which his ministers were resigning en masse was really quite peculiar. But it does seem that the Prime Minister is in bunker mentality, holed up in number 10, well, I should say the flat of number 11, of course, where he actually lives behind me. This is a Prime Minister who is determined to stay the course and will not resign likely due to pressure or influence from anyone else. The only way to remove this Prime Minister is through the constitutional mechanisms of the Conservative Party. And of course, yesterday, one of the big twists and turns in this story is that the executive of the 1922 committee decided that now was not the time to change the rules, to allow another confidence vote in the Prime Minister, that the earliest that could possibly happen is when the new executive of that committee is elected. Now, they sped up that process. The new executive will now not be elected on Wednesday, but on Monday. So that's the soonest, potentially, that things might move in that direction in terms of what Conservative MPs can do to dislodge the Prime Minister. And up until then, all they can do is plead with him.
Tom, thank you very much indeed. Let's get more take on this. We'll be going back and forward to Tom throughout the morning. In the studio, Conservative political consultant and strategist Peter Barnes joins us in the studio. You see, Peter, here's the thing, and I speak on behalf of our viewers and listeners today. A lot of them think they elected Boris Johnson. A lot of them think they elected a president. He thinks he is a president. Would you care to put everyone straight on this?
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? Boris Johnson has a very loyal supporting base. Even now, considering absolutely everything, if you go onto social media, particularly on Twitter, he has some of the most kind of fervent supporters I've probably seen since the Corbynista lot, if I'm being brutally honest. And the similarities between the two are very stark. But you are right that he does kind of have this kind of presidential mentality right now. But that's not really how our system works. We have a parliamentary democracy. We elect our individual MPs rather than actual Boris Johnson. So it doesn't really make much sense as to why he's going down this path and why voters seem to think this. But it's a common thing because of how dominant American politics plays in our system. People seem to think that we have the same way of doing stuff, and we simply don't. It's interesting that even a couple of MPs I've even seen saying we should probably have a general election to renew the mandate. Well, that's not really how our system works, and it's actually startling to see MPs even coming out with this line as well.
You talk about the path that Boris Johnson's going down. Let's talk about the very short-term path, let's say the next 24 hours. How do you think it's going to play out?
Well, if this was any other politician, I don't think we'd have even got this far. But the problem with Boris Johnson is seeing is rather believing. So, he's reinvented himself more times than Prince and David Bowie put together and has more political lives than a cat. So I've kind of stopped making strong predictions on what's going to happen, particularly on days like this where literally anything could happen. So we're just really going to have to wait and see. I will be very, very surprised if he actually does resign. I think for him now, I think it's more of a case of he doesn't want to be seen to have quit. I think he would rather be forced out than walk away. I think that's where he is right now.
That mentality must cause damage. I mean, the longer he lies stagnant in the well, the more he poisons the Conservative base or perception towards conservatism.
I think there's definitely an argument towards that, but I think the fact we've had, like you said, about 46 resignations now, I expect that to actually increase today. I think a lot of people will realise that the Conservatives want him out and that Boris is the problem and not the Conservatives. Most Conservative members I've spoken to in the last couple of days have all said he's just got to go. And this was even before the mass resignations and the likes of Sajid Javid and Rishi Sunak. Once those two went, the floodgates rather opened, and here we are now. But it does look like, for me, he's not going to go anywhere, like I say. And as Tom just correctly said, it's down to the 1922 committee to basically lever him out of power.
Stanley Johnson was on GB News last night and sort of echoed some of the sentiment you had there, which is that he said, I know my son, he's not going to resign. He's going to go out, and if it is going to go out, it's going to be with a bitter fight.
Well, let's hear what Stanley Johnson actually had to say. Here it is.
If there is a fight, and by the way, it's not Boris who is choosing to fight, it's the parliamentary party which is conservative. If there is a fight, he will go down to the wire. And I think that people in the party tonight need to consider very, very carefully indeed. Do they really want to go down this route? Do they really want to force a second vote? Do they want to do that? Are they sure they want to do that? Because, for my money, actually, justice. It's a matter of justice. Justice is on Boris's side.
Well, they say the apple never falls far from the tree. And it looks, they look like one and the same person. They talk like one and the same person. But the headlines in the papers today are things like, Boris Johnson, you're desperate, you're deluded. Great headline in the Metro, get exit done, Boris. But, the trouble is that Stanley Johnson and Boris Johnson are making this all about them now, surely.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I did watch the interview with Stanley last night, and I do think you're right. The way in which they talk is exactly the same. The thing is that with Boris is so many people have kind of counted him out for so many times in so many positions. So many people said he would never be Mayor of London, that he would never be an MP, that he would never be Prime Minister, he wouldn't join the Vote Leave campaign. So really, he's defied the odds in so many ways and at so many times. You can start to understand why he thinks, no, even though we would see the writing on the wall, he would see something completely different, considering, like you said, his political career is one of ups and downs.
The more I look at him, the more I study them, the more I see parallels between him and Donald Trump.
Yeah, this is a common parallel that's being made right now, considering the January 6 riots and how Trump kind of lingered on with power. I do think that Boris will eventually go, and I do think it'll be through the 22 committee. But when it comes to the Trump comparisons, there's definitely something there in terms of that mentality that they perceive of themselves as an outsider despite being very much of the establishment. I think that's really where that comes from, the idea that the media's against him, that his party's against him. And I think you can get a bit of a bunker mentality and you can kind of grip your teeth in a little bit.
In the meantime, lots of people, the Conservative Party, the public as well, will be looking as to who could be the next Prime Minister. Runners and riders.
Oh, I think there's about 6 or 7 so far. I know we had the Suella Braverman announced last night on the TV that she was going to run. Sajid Javid, I think, will throw his hat in. Rishi Sunak is still seen as the heir apparent by so many. Nadeem Zahawi, and, he's been making some serious power moves, particularly taking the role of Chancellor and then coming out yesterday saying Boris Johnson should resign. I have to admit, I didn't think he had that in him. But
that was a bizarre strategy, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's a bizarre one. But apparently, from the reports we've been reading, that he's been working with Lynton Crosby, the kind of election guru behind the scenes for quite some time, and it's no secret around SW1 in Westminster that he's got leadership ambitions. I think he's very good, and I think he'll go very far. Whether he'll win, I don't quite know.
There was a lot of talk yesterday that he wasn't first choice to be Chancellor.
Yeah,
he made himself be first choice.
The rumour is that Liz Truss was supposed to take over as Chancellor, and like you said, he kind of bullied his way into it. And I think that was somewhat of he wants the kind of name recognition so that he would then be able to launch a kind of general election campaign if he ever became leader. So more people would really know who he is.
That's the thing, you've got to let your intentions known, because if you don't, people interpret. So, for instance, those who stay on what may be a sinking ship or whatever will be judged accordingly, and those who've jumped ship will be seen as legitimate leadership contenders. But Zahawi, he seems to be saying, I'm going to stay, but we're going to do things my way. Yeah,
I think there's 2 ways to look at the people who stay. I think there is the kind of sinking ship and kind of like people who just the Johnson loyalists. But I also think there's kind of something to be said for people who are staying on because somebody needs to keep the lights on. Somebody needs to keep the ship running, despite all of this going down. I think, a few people have stayed on, and despite the fact they do probably think that Boris needs to go, because there was quite a number of cabinet secretaries that went to Boris yesterday, but they have said he needs to go, but they haven't resigned. I do think there's something to be said for, sticking to it. Ben Wallace, in particular, said, I'm not interested in political parlour games. He said he's got a war to win. So, there is definitely something to it.
It's interesting, Peter, you saying someone's got to stay to keep the lights on. What do nearly 50 resignations mean to the engine room or whatever is happening, however junior these resignations are? Does this stop the day-to-day workings of government?
This is something that we'll probably look into once all of this is over. It's just how much has actually been missed and what, I was speaking to quite a few kind of consultants and lobbyists just the other day, and they were saying like so much of their work has just stopped because they don't know who to pick up the phone and ring and to talk to. So this kind of idea that the business of government is carrying on doesn't really wash, considering so many people have had to kind of put everything on hold. There's got a couple of big bills we're supposed to hit into Parliament, for example, the Financial Services Bill, and that just seems to have died a death because John Glenn, the City Minister, is gone. So, there is a real question to be asked here about how much has been missed and what's not happened for the country.
It's fascinating getting your whole take on things. Peter is a political consultant and he's a strategist as well. So it's very interesting hearing what's happening. I hope you stay with us and we hear from you again later in the programme. Yeah. But for the moment, thank you very much indeed. If you've listened to all this, we're only outlaying the arguments for and against. Let us know what you think. You can tweet us at GB News and you can email gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Right now, though, it's 16 minutes past 6. Very good morning to you on a turbulent day, to say the least. Let's bring you up to date with what else is happening today. And 16 organisations are warning new proposals to improve internet safety laws will threaten free speech. They say the government's online safety bill focuses too heavily on what people say online rather than regulating the behaviour of tech companies.
A new report suggests attainment gaps and educational exclusion make it harder for Gypsy, Roma and traveller students to attend university. The Higher Education Policy Institute found they have the worst educational outcomes of all ethnicities and are least likely to enter higher education by the age of 19.
British Airways has announced it's going to axe a further 10,300 short-haul flights until the end of October. The airline's now cancelled 13% of all its flights this summer. Well, the airline have said they believe the cuts are the right thing to do for their customers and colleagues, and that the newfound flexibility will help to protect holiday flights.
Look, coming up, we're going to be talking to a pollster. We've got a few of those in today because they are scientifically able to reflect the mood, see the trends that are going on. And we're asking that pollster what would happen if the Prime Minister were to actually call a general election.
Yeah, well, let us know particularly what you think. Yesterday you were quite busy because Eamonn's got a very nice golden gong. But just as the day went on, it was resignation. You know, I read the news on GB News and we're thinking, oh my goodness.
Kept you busy.
We were so busy. So the country actually reeling, the Conservative Party reeling from what happened yesterday. If there was a snap general election, what would it look like? We'll find out shortly after the weather.
Good morning, I'm Stephen Keats with your latest Met Office forecast. And some of us will be starting off rather cloudy this morning, but stick with it. Warm sunshine will develop quite widely through the day, although for the far northwest of Scotland, turning a bit cloudy and damp later. We've got this remnants of this weak weather front just clearing away from the south first thing this morning. Otherwise, this ridge of high pressure toppling across the UK. However, waiting in the wings, the next set of fronts, which will be working their way into the far northwest of Scotland as we move on through the day. Elsewhere, though, across Scotland, there's a lot of sunshine to start off this morning, and that sunshine extending further south as we move on through this morning. And by the afternoon, actually, a lot of places across eastern and southern Scotland, Wales and England, seeing a lot of blue sky, lots of sunshine around. A bit cloudier, though, for Northern Ireland, into the northwest of Scotland, eventually with some bits and pieces of rain here. Quite cool, relatively speaking, here. Well, elsewhere, though, lots of warmth to be had, 21 to 23, up to the mid-20s in parts of the south. So a lovely evening to come this evening across a good part of the UK, except, of course, across the far northwest of Scotland, where we've got this weather front bringing further patchy rain and drizzle, mainly for the northwest Highlands, but a few spots getting across the east of the mountains, one or two spots into Northern Ireland too. And a bit of cloud filtering south into some western areas. Clearest weather, though, across parts of eastern and southern England. Despite this, with the clear skies, the air mass is warming up, so we're going to see those temperatures no lower than the low teens for most of us. So Friday will start off lovely and sunny across many central, eastern and southern parts of England. A bit cloudier further towards the north and west. And the further northwest you go, still a chance of some bits and pieces of light rain and drizzle, parts of Northern Ireland, western and northern Scotland, but not amounting to much through the day. And again, by the end of the day on Friday, a lot of dry weather to be had pretty much nationwide. Perhaps warmer still, though, on Friday afternoon, 27 or so in London, widely high teens to low to mid-20s. Then into the weekend, early part of next week, a lot more dry weather on offer, becoming drier and sunnier, I think, further north as well compared to what we've seen over the last couple of days. And those temperatures starting to climb as well, 30 Celsius possible early next week.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Very good to see you again. It's Eamonn and Rosie. This is Breakfast on GB News on television and radio.
Boris Johnson is still in power, just about, and number 10, despite resignations and a cabinet rebellion.
He insists he's had a colossal mandate to keep going from you, the voters, despite increasing calls for him to actually go. And with another dramatic day expected for Boris Johnson, what do the polls suggest about the direction of the Conservative Party and indeed you, the voting public?
Well, let's speak to Gideon Skinner. He's the head of political research at Ipsos. My goodness, Boris Johnson is suggesting that if it comes to it, he'll call a snap general election. If he does, is that the right call for him?
Well, it would be maybe a surprising choice, given where the Conservatives are in the polls. It's kind of very difficult to estimate exactly what would happen, but you'd think at the way they are at the moment, they'd certainly be looking at losing their majority. But of course, you know, we're not in an election period now. We know that the public can kind of react differently if an election is actually called. But at the moment, the Conservatives have got a lot of troubles. Boris Johnson's personal ratings, we know, are poor. 7 in 10 are dissatisfied with the way that he's doing his job, and around 6 in 10, including half of Conservative voters, think he should resign. But the Conservatives' problems aren't just about his personal ratings. There are also their own brand ratings. The Conservative brand ratings have been getting worse. They're falling on things like whether they're fit to govern. And of course, they've got great big issues like the economy and cost of living to deal with.
Comes down to bluff and counter bluff, and you're the guy that should read through all of this, Gideon. So Boris Johnson, I mean, he's obviously the parliamentary party have obviously fallen out of love with him. He's saying to the parliamentary party, right, you be careful what you wish for, because I may call a general election and you lot will lose your seats. So could he actually pull off a Houdini and the public mood swings back his way, or the public mood looks at the alternative and doesn't see one?
So it's true that Labour themselves have got their own issues. Keir Starmer has reduced a lot of the negativity that was there for Labour under some of his predecessors, but he hasn't really replaced it with a great deal of positive enthusiasm. He's not really kind of breaking out of the range of the kind of the average position for a leader of the opposition at the moment. He's not where, say, David Cameron or Tony Blair were when they were successful opposition leaders. So he certainly has some way to go in terms of building enthusiasm for the Labour Party. Around about half say they don't know what he stands for. But it's still the case that Labour are ahead and Keir Starmer are ahead on many metrics as well as voting intentions. Certainly some of that is as much down to Conservative weakness as Labour strengths, but Labour are ahead still on many of those issues.
Let's look at the sort of inner workings of the Conservative Party right now and the potential for a leadership contest. Based on what you know from polling, who actually stands a chance to become the next PM?
Well, actually, it's probably a pretty open race at the moment. If you look at the public as a whole, then Rishi Sunak and sort of just behind him, Sajid Javid probably have the most favourable ratings. And amongst Conservative supporters, they tend to have the most favourable ratings as well. But that's still only a minority of people who feel positively about them. They have a reasonable number of negative ratings. They have lots of don't knows. And for Rishi Sunak, his ratings are certainly nowhere near where they were during his honeymoon period at the beginning of the pandemic. And then for many of the other contenders, it's a sort of a question of the public don't really have a very strong view about them yet. So where they are at the moment isn't necessarily a good guide of what views might be were they to become Prime Minister. We would expect the public's views to change quite rapidly should one of them become Prime Minister. So there's not necessarily a very clear favourite.
If there isn't a clear favourite, the cabinet ministers right now have got to make a bit of a gamble. If they want to put their own career first, which many of them do, how much might they be hurt right now by standing with Boris Johnson?
So, you're right. That's clearly going to be a question that many of them are grappling with. I suppose the key point at this stage, if they're thinking about that, is that it's not the public, of course, who are going to make this decision. It's going to be their fellow Conservative MPs and Conservative Party members. And they're going to have a slightly different view. And so that's what they're going to be basing their views on. But you would hope that they are also thinking about how they would play amongst the public as a whole when they're making that judgment.
OK, Gideon, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. Gideon is Head of Political Research at Ipsos. And with that, we take a break. We're going through the papers. Political editor David Wooding on that one and broadcaster Liz Kershaw.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News. My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
6:30 is the time. News headlines are these. And we begin with British Airways announcing it will access further 10,300 short-haul flights until the end of October.
The airline's now cancelled 13% of all its flights this summer. BA have said they believe the cuts are the right thing to do for their customers and colleagues, and that the newfound flexibility will help to protect holidays.
Prince Harry's legal case over police protection is going to be heard at the High Court today. The Duke is seeking permission for a judicial review of the Home Office decision to stop him paying for security for himself and his family when they are in the UK.
Women's Euro 2022 has kicked off and Lionesses have won their first game with a 1-0 victory over Austria in front of what was a record crowd of almost 70,000 fans. Well, England coach described the win as so important. The team, if you want to watch, will play on Monday against Norway.
Some great headlines in the papers today. Let's go through those now in the company of the political editor of The Sun on Sunday. And that is David Wooding. I forgot your name. They only give you a title up there. And at my age, I forget everything. And we've got broadcaster Liz Kershaw. Very good to see. I have to say, some of these headlines are absolutely brilliant. Liz, look at this one in the front of the Star. And it says, Dear Jane, it's a mock letter to the
agony
page.
auntie.
Dear Jane, I've been caught out telling a few whoppers and all my colleagues have either resigned or been sacked. So how can I convince the public I'm not a complete and utter shameless chancer? How does he?
Dear Boris, a lot of the public don't believe that anyway and still support you. Stay in there, mate. Love, Jane.
OK. The headline in the Metro, get exit done.
Yes, it's quite ironic that they've, such an anti-Brexit paper, have pinched and moderated that slogan from 2016 and 2019 to splash on the front page and sell a few papers.
So do you think there's not an exit in store?
Oh, I think we're seeing a really awful sight in Britain at the moment. We're seeing bullying on an industrial scale. I think a well-meaning man who, I went to France this week, no papers required except my passport. I've been to gigs and festivals this summer. Every time I find myself in a crowd, I think, here, but for Boris, I would not be. I've got a couple of friends who've got COVID at the moment, but they're not going to die.
What did you say? You went to what? You went to a concert?
Concerts, festivals, yeah.
What's Boris got to do with that?
Because I'm in a crowd and I'm safe.
You feel that?
Yeah, I feel that because I'm triple vaccinated. And I said, 2 friends of mine have currently, a lot of people now have got COVID. Something like 1 in 30 in England. And 2 friends who are, in their 60s have got it, but they're not frightened. They just feel like they've got a cold or flu and they're going to get through it. And the rest of the summer will be back to normal.
That's because he didn't lead the charge in that.
He did. He invested in AstraZeneca to produce a vaccine before anybody else in the world. And
See,
also,
I'm fascinated that you talk about him being a well-meaning man.
Yeah.
I look at most politicians, particularly in his case, and see a self-serving egomaniac.
No, I don't see that. I think look at the evidence of when he was standing up to Sage, albeit quietly behind the scenes, and he wanted this country to have fewer restrictions and shorter lockdowns. Try living in France throughout the epidemic. You needed to fill in a form, like 3 sheets of paper, just to go out and buy a loaf of bread.
I mean,
you
had to have a living in France.
Right.
You right now would say Macron's in a much stronger position than Boris Johnson.
Not really. They've just had elections. and has got no power at all now because his party have been completely undermined by the electorate. So the electorate said, OK, we don't want Le Pen as president, so they voted for Macron, but not with their hearts.
David,
and now they've voted for Le Pen and the other left-wing parties.
A lot of people within his own party, the parliamentary party, do not want to see Boris Johnson as its leader, as the Prime Minister anymore. We're talking about mutinies, the Mail saying he stared down any mutiny yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, without doubt, his power and his authority is draining away slowly. I mean, what we're watching here is the slow death, political death of a Prime Minister. I think he's doomed whatever happens here. Question is, how does he end it all? Does he's dug into his bunker in number 10 here. Does he resign with dignity? He can't do that now. He's dug in too much that he can't. So he's going to be dragged out and slaughtered by his own
you agree
troops.
with his dad. This was his dad speaking on Dan Wootton last night, and this is what Stanley Johnson had to say.
If there is a fight, and by the way, it's not Boris who is choosing to fight, it's the parliamentary party which is concerned. But if there is a fight, he will go down to the wire. And I think that people in the party tonight need to consider very, very carefully indeed. Do they really want to go down this route? Do they really want to force a second vote? Do they want to do that? Are they sure they want to do that? Because, for my money, actually, justice. It's a matter of justice. Justice is on Boris's side.
So the implicit threat there is what the Prime Minister said to his MPs, which is you back me or you may face political oblivion.
Yes. I mean, the issue here really is, over a long period of time, 6 or 7 months, there have been a lot of reverses. I mean, we have Partygate, we've had, and that's been a drip issue, and partly because of the way he's handled it, not being too forthright, making mistakes, getting things wrong. It's had a double impact on him. I mean, the Chris Pincher business is another one. We were misled. We were told one thing by Downing Street. It turned out it was the other. Then, of course, there was that hand grenade thrown in by the senior civil servant to say that Boris Johnson was aware of it. So these unforced errors have just exacerbated his position and given a greater feeling of shambles at the heart of government. Now, the Conservative Party, with 2 reverses in local general election, in in 2 by-elections, have now taken the view, well, can he win the next election for us? For some time, they've been thinking, well, who else can win an election for us? And they're not really decided on that, but they've come to the conclusion now that they would be better without Boris Johnson. Now, that could be a big mistake, but that's their call.
Who would they be better with?
Well, that is the problem. I think they're doomed either way. I think they're going to struggle to win a majority at the next election. And even with somebody else, somebody once said that with Boris, they've got a 5% chance of winning. With somebody else, they've got a 25% chance of winning. It's not much.
It's interesting listening to David's analysis there, because they would have to win against Sir Keir Starmer. And a lot of people would say a man with a personality bypass.
Well, Keir Starmer won't win outright.
No,
he won't win with a majority. So the choice in front of the British people, and can I just say how interesting it is that when you talk about Boris, people correct you and say, oh, we don't vote for a Prime Minister, it's not a presidential, and we vote for our MPs, and then they top them up. And then when it suits them, they say, oh, can we win without Boris? Who could win in that set? So double standards. But Keir Starmer's not going to win. So the choice before the British people at the next general election, without Boris Johnson, will be the Conservative Party with X, or a coalition of Keir Starmer, the Liberal Democrats, all 8 of them, or whatever they are now, and horror of horrors, the SNP. So with Ian Blackwood, the leader of the SNP in Parliament, around 50 MPs, powerful, but who'll be pulling the strings? Nicola Sturgeon, who doesn't even want to be part of the Union, the United Kingdom. So you're going to vote in, by default, a government who wants to split the UK. And, we haven't heard any policies from Labour. The only thing we've heard from Keir Starmer is, you're a liar, you're a cheat, you're hopeless, Partygate, the man who's himself being investigated currently by the police and has promised to resign if they slap a ticket on him, a fixed penalty.
Wouldn't that be dramatic if that happened?
I couldn't believe his audacity yesterday, banging on about that still, when he's facing that.
Well, what the country is facing is inflation, interest rates, and David, talk us through. We've got a new Chancellor in position. For how long, we don't actually know. It could be a very short-lived
It could be the next leader of the Conservative Party and Prime Minister.
Talk us through this story in the Star today about interest rates.
Yes, well, they've gone up 5 times in the past year or so, and the Bank of England are talking about sticking them up again. They've gone up by 1/4 of a percentage point each time, and there's a feeling that they need to crank them up quicker. So this is all about cooling down the inflation rate and trying to get the economy back on track. But of course, it's going to be more difficulty for people with mortgages, particularly those who haven't got their fixed rates sorted out.
Do you guys need more interest rates to cool down your spending? Because I don't know about you guys, but I sort of think I don't need to be warned. I don't need things to be even more expensive. I'm just not spending the way I used to.
No, because the old mantra for cooling down the economy was take money out of people's pockets by increasing interest rates. So they have to pay more for their housing and they've got less disposable income. No, I can't see the logic of that at the moment because people are absolutely on their uppers. £2 a gallon, £2 a litre for petrol. 120 quid it cost me to fill my car this week. Food prices, I can't believe the amount by which some foodstuffs have gone up. I'm not mourning, I'm lucky, but there are people who are two youngish people, parents, going out every day, doing 2 or 3 jobs, kids at school. They don't need the mortgage to go up. Another thing that's really troubling me is and if you look at the global money markets in the city, they've got the finger on the pulse. It's like putting a bet on Paddy Power or Ladbrokes. The pound is tanking in the last couple of days. It's now below £1 to $1.20.
So this foreign holiday that you can't afford.
Yeah.
You'll even be able to afford it less when you're there, and you'll have nothing to spend your money on.
Also means that food and oil prices are continue to go up because our pound is buying less. And the other thing is, it's always worrying. What will the UK economy's credit rating be? It will be harmed by this because the money markets around the world will devalue our credit rating.
I hear everything you're saying, right? So then, it's not beyond belief that the existing parliamentary party that is not supporting Boris Johnson, if he did call a snap election and all the things that Liz has highlighted there, the public may decide, well, he's better than the alternative, so we'll vote him back in, and then it will be a whole different ball game. I mean, it's one of the few ways he could circumvent what's going on in Parliament and just create a new Parliament.
Absolutely right. But, of course, don't forget, he's got an 80-seat majority at the moment. Why would he want to risk that? Well, it would be a desperate action. There's some suggestion that the Queen would stop that because we have it would be a constitutional crisis if he did that because we've got 2 years to run. He can form a government at the moment because he's got enough MPs. It's just that they won't let him. So it would be a real development if he was to call it.
I think he should, because I know those traitors that are stabbing him in the back. And let's face it, I'm going to do an analysis of this today. I must get a life. But the prominent people, look at who are saying he must go. Let's look at the majority. I had the pleasure in the green room a couple of weeks ago. It's not a question you get to ask a man a lot, but I was able to say, excuse me, how big's your majority? And it was 4,000. I said, oh, that's not a lot, is it? No wonder you wanted Boris to go. So there's a lot of people with self-interest who are trying to... I think you should call a general election. If those people lose their seats, egg on their face. If they win them, then it means that Boris has got the popular vote, the mandate from the people. And if a 96-year-old woman with a big handbag who was born into the job can stop democracy, well, we're all in a bad way.
Guys, if we could be in a bad way, depending on what we eat today, and there's 2 food stories that I want to talk to you about.
Yeah.
David, first of all, chocolate, because I'm seeing this. This is in the I newspaper, page 2, and it asks a question. Do you store chocolate in the fridge? Well, if my wife is watching, I don't have any chocolate in the house. But when there is, it's nothing I like more than a Bounty bar straight from the fridge.
From the fridge. Well, 55% of people, according to the Eye, keep their chocky in the fridge. I read somewhere recently, and I'm trying to recall where I read it, that you're not supposed to put chocolate in the fridge. Nor are you supposed to put eggs in the fridge either, apparently.
Right. I just sort of put everything in the fridge.
Well, have you ever noticed? We have a little egg basket.
Yes.
And if we're boiling eggs for breakfast, they're great out of there. But if you take them straight out of the fridge, they're a bit weird when they've been boiled.
So they shouldn't.
They shouldn't be in the fridge. And there's something about chocolate as well. I know why you like it. It's cool, probably.
Yeah. And it changes the texture when you eat it if it's really cold.
I used to love, when I was a kid, Club biscuits.
Yes.
When the chocolate was
Orange or mint?
Orange.
Oh, yes.
When the chocolate was really thick, especially on the endy bits.
A lot of chocolate on your biscuit, John.
Join the club. Right. And from the fridge, you're right, it's the consistency, the chocolate's kind of
OK,
crunchy.
so the warning is don't really do that.
Yes, don't do it. And it says in this article here that the place where they're in a league table where people most like to chill their chocolate. Northampton comes top and Wolverhampton comes second.
Yes.
Leeds comes 10th.
I'm in
I tell you what doesn't work in the fridge.
What?
Maltesers.
Oh, do they go soggy in the middle?
No, they go hard.
All right.
They're just too hard.
Butter. Have you ever tried spreading bread and butter when you've got the butter straight out of the
fridge?
No, you
I thought you were about to suggest butter on Maltesers, and I thought that really would be rather unpleasant. Can we just talk, though, about attitudes with food? Because, Liz, people often say, if someone's a little bit tetchy, they might say, you're hangry. Mm-hmm. Is there weight, then, behind the colloquialism that says, you're a bit hangry?
Hanger.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you this for factually true. Every female I know, my daughter being the worst case of it, my wife being a perfect example of it.
Gosh, you're really throwing people in it this morning.
Don't mess with them if they haven't eaten.
Somebody give Eamonn a bacon butty.
Don't mess with them. I'm fine. I'm placid and
it's true.
all of the time.
It's true. My eldest son, first of all, when he was 30, he said, I got some chocolate out of the fridge to give to him, and he said, Mum, can I say something?
Yes.
Now, I'm 30. I've never liked chocolate. You've always put the blooming chocolate in the fridge. Can we please stop? Anyway, since he was a baby, his temper when he was not fed, and he's not fat or anything like that, but he just needed food. He'd have a complete tantrum on the beach or something at the age of 4. Somebody said, for goodness sake, get him something to eat. As soon as he ate it, he calmed down. So it is a real thing.
It's a real thing.
It's in your head, it's in your tummy, and it's all connected.
When I was running a news desk some years ago, I used to notice that at different times in the afternoon, my secretary would bring me a portion of chips or some chocolate biscuits and a coffee. And it was only when I left she told me that she called temper tamers, because when I was getting a little bit sharp with the staff, she realised that I was hungry.
So it was a mood management strategy.
You were the nicest guy I know. Your brother, on the other hand, who I've also worked with.
He's a nut job, yeah.
It's your blood sugar. Somebody last week, we're going to have a competition. We're going to put a photo up in a minute. Last week, somebody thought was doing the papers with Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin.
Wow, there you go.
I have to say, yesterday, actually, we knew it was going to be an absolutely turbulent day. So the producers just went out, and the row of desks behind me was piled high. Crisps, chocolate. We were there. We were there for the long run.
Health food to keep us going.
There was nothing healthy. It was pretty much carbohydrate and sugar. But it was well needed.
Guys, for the moment, thank you. We'll leave that, and David and Liz will be back in about 40 minutes' time. We're going to bring you up to date with what's happening news-wise. Travel to start.
Yeah, and British Airways announced it's going to axe another 10,300 short-haul flights from now until the end of October. The airline now has cancelled 13% of all its flights this summer. That's a nightmare if that involves you. British Airways have said they believe the cuts are the right thing to do for their customers and colleagues, and the newfound flexibility will help protect holidays.
Prince Harry's legal case over police protection is going to be heard at the High Court today. He's seeking permission for a judicial review of the Home Office decision to stop him paying for security for himself and his family when they're in the UK.
Women's Euro 2022 has kicked off, and the Lionesses have won their first game with a 1-0 victory over Austria in front of a record crowd of almost 70,000 fans. Now, if you want to watch the next game, the team play on Monday against Norway.
Fascinating woman to talk to now, and that is friend of the show and psychotherapist Lucy Beresford. Lucy, we're going to talk to you. Obviously, very lovely to see you, because we're all fascinated. We're getting all this political analysis into Boris. What will the next move be? What's the political strategy? What makes him tick? But you can give us an insight into his mindset psychologically. How would you describe his personality? Give us an idea.
Well, he's someone who operates as a lone wolf. He doesn't really surround himself with close friends. And I think historically, perhaps throughout childhood, because some of the things that he had to witness, some of the things that he had to endure, this is someone who has only ever really trusted himself and his own instincts. We know that he wanted to be world king. We know from teachers and his headmaster at Eton that they observed that he felt that the rules didn't really apply to him. And therefore, this is someone who has operated for the long term on his own gut instincts. So right now, that's what we're seeing, but perhaps on steroids. He hasn't got a firm coterie of people around him that he can talk to and perhaps whom he implicitly trusts. And as the people come for him, which is how he would see it, this sort of mob coming towards him, that's when he's going to feel even more defensive and even more determined to do things his way.
You think his psychological makeup is that when people come for him, he actually just doubles down?
Yes, this is someone who has historically seen the benefits of that. And as human beings, we tend to stick with the behavioural patterns that work for us. And I say work for us in the sense that they work for us on our terms. So we may be looking at someone's behaviour and thinking, well, that doesn't look particularly sensible. That looks, really quite crazy or inappropriate. But if it has a logic to the person concerned, if it has a logic to that individual, and if, for example, their mindset is, well, this is what we've done before and it always worked for us before, so we're going to carry on doing it, then that logic will actually be motivating their behaviour. And what I observe is that because so many other people have changed their minds in the last, let's say, 48 hours, they've changed their minds, but Boris Johnson hasn't necessarily changed his mind. And we do know, for example, in very, very basic sort of personality or very basic relationship issues, you can have a situation where somebody wants to break up with another person. And that person has made that decision, and it takes the second person a longer time for their heart to catch up with the reality. And in a much amplified way, I see that that's what's happening with Boris Johnson. At the moment, he's digging in because, in a sense, his heart hasn't caught up with the reality of the actual situation.
Stage does reality have to be looked at? I say this because we've got some breaking news coming in that the Northern Ireland Secretary of State, Brandon Lewis, has just resigned. So that's one of the bigger beasts adding his name to saying, Boris, we can't support you anymore. At what stage does he have to look and say, I'm beaten here?
Well, on some psychological level, he may always need to carry a narrative that he was never beaten. And that's why I think some of the language that you have seen maybe in the Select Committee yesterday, his defiance at PMQs, he is creating his own narrative, because that's what we do as human beings. We tell ourselves stories in order to survive. So psychologically, he may need to really stay close to this narrative, which is that he is still loved, that people still want him in charge, which is why he's focusing so much on the electorate in 2019. So at the moment, again, he's not really focusing on the immediate reality, but he's creating an alternative narrative for himself that allows himself to stay stable and emotionally connected to what he wants in life, which is to maintain this ideology that he is okay, that he's the world king, that he is loved. So the reality, and Brandon Lewis, as you say, is another really big beast. It looks really obvious to the rest of us of what the direction of this narrative is going, but internally, Boris may just simply not be able to accept the reality of that. And again, in order to make people understand that, I'm sure we could recognise that there are many ways for all of us where we've taken time to accept reality. It could have been around a breakup, it could have been around a bereavement. We can understand it intellectually, but in our hearts, we're not quite there yet.
Lucy, thank you very much, Lucy Beresford, joining us on the programme.
Thanks,
psychotherapist. More information for you on the resignation. Another cabinet minister to go. Brandon Lewis, I've got his resignation statement here. He says, a decent and responsible government relies on honesty, integrity and mutual respect. It is a matter of profound personal regret for me that I must leave government as I no longer believe those values are being upheld.
You see, there's a bigger story behind this as well, because, Brandon Lewis, obviously integral to making the Northern Ireland protocol work. And, continually out of the Northern Ireland office, we just hear that Johnson isn't interested. He doesn't understand the fine detail. He made this deal and left Northern Ireland in a particular mess with all of this. So, for your Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, when protocol is being renegotiated or contested, to say, you know what, there's no honesty about this. There's you've got to have a mutual respect. You've got to know what you're talking about. And you, obviously, Prime Minister, don't. People really, is this the last big wake-up call that Boris Johnson needs? And I know a lot of you are saying, here's Paula in Reading, a lot of you very pro-Boris Johnson. This is just a witch hunt. The longer it goes on, the more I think he should stay. So she has the Boris Johnson mentality that Lucy Beresford was talking about there. Jim thinks this is an assault upon Brexit and the 17 million people who voted for this. Johnson should sack the whole traitorous lot of them. And Jeff adds, how can Priti Patel tell Boris Johnson to quit? That's beyond me, because she's so inept at her job. You have to admire her tenacity, though, to carry on.
Well, the person who's showing real tenacity right now is Boris Johnson. Do you think he's deluded, defiant? Keep your views coming in. You can email us, gbviews@gbnews.uk. If you've just joined us, that breaking news is that Brandon Lewis, Northern Ireland Secretary, has resigned. We'll have reaction to that at the top of the hour in just a couple of minutes' time. Next, though, the weather.
Good morning, I'm Stephen Keats with your latest Met Office forecast. And some of us will be starting off rather cloudy this morning, but stick with it. Warm sunshine will develop quite widely through the day, although for the far northwest of Scotland, turning a bit cloudy and damp later. We've got this remnants of this weak weather front just clearing away from the south first thing this morning, otherwise this ridge of high pressure toppling across the UK. However, waiting in the wings, the next set of fronts, which will be working their way into the far northwest of Scotland as we move on through the day. Elsewhere, though, across Scotland, a lot of sunshine to start off this morning, and that sunshine extending further south as we move on through this morning. And by the afternoon, actually, a lot of places across eastern and southern Scotland, Wales and England, seeing a lot of blue sky, lots of sunshine around. A bit cloudier, though, for Northern Ireland, into the northwest of Scotland, eventually with some bits and pieces of rain here. Quite cool, relatively speaking, here. Well, elsewhere, though, lots of warmth to be had, 21 to 23, up to the mid-20s in parts of the south. So a lovely evening to come this evening across good part of the UK, except of course the far northwest of Scotland, where we've got this weather front bringing further patchy rain and drizzle, mainly for the northwest Highlands, but a few spots getting across the east of the mountains, one or two spots into Northern Ireland too, and a bit of cloud filtering south into some western areas. Clearest weather though across parts of eastern and southern England. Despite this, with the clear skies, the air mass is warming up, so we're going to see those temperatures no lower than the low teens for most of us. So Friday will start off lovely and sunny across many central, eastern and southern parts of England. A bit cloudier further towards the north and west. And the further northwest you go, still a chance of some bits and pieces of light rain and drizzle. Parts of Northern Ireland, western and northern Scotland, but not amounting to much through the day. And again, by the end of the day on Friday, a lot of dry weather to be had pretty much nationwide. Perhaps warmer still, though, on Friday afternoon, 27 or so in London. Widely high teens to low to mid-20s. Then into the weekend, early part of next week, a lot more dry weather on offer, becoming drier and sunnier, I think, further north as well compared to what we've seen over the last couple of days. And those temperatures starting to climb as well, 30 Celsius possible early next week.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
The Prime Minister hangs on to power after 2 more resignations this morning.
A very good morning to you. The time's just after 7 o'clock. It is Thursday, the 7th of July. You're tuned into breakfast on GB News. This morning with Eamonn, Holmes and Rosie Wright leading the news. This is what we've got.
Well, the Northern Ireland Secretary and the Care Minister now have resigned in the past few minutes. The total number of resignations from the government is now 48.
Following a chaotic day for the PM, last night he sacked the Levelling Up Secretary, Michael Gove, for disloyalty after Michael Gove briefed the press that the PM had to go. Other key allies held crisis talks last night with the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, also telling the Prime Minister his time was up.
Speaking in front of the Liaison Committee yesterday afternoon, gosh, a lot's changed since then, well, the Prime Minister hinted that if Conservative MPs forced him out, he would call a snap general election.
Well, remember, you can join in any of our discussions today, and you have been doing that. I'm just seeing these views coming in. Roger says, I've had about 5 hours sleep because I've been so annoyed at the way the Prime Minister, which Roger says he voted for, is being treated by the Conservative Party. I'm amazed he's still there and hasn't caved into the people that are trying to get rid of him out of number 10. And Paul says it's certain that lots of people, I know a lot, who were Labour voters but voted for Boris and not the Conservative Party. So this is the idea that a lot of you hold, that it was almost like a presidential election, and that certainly Boris Johnson feels that he got the vote, not the Conservative Party in general. So gbviews at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet at gbnews. And while you're there and while you're doing things, could I just say a personal thank you very much? Well, it isn't just me. I mean, it's mostly me, but...
Whose name is on it?
Thank you. My name is on it, but it's for everybody, and it's a great boost for this fantastic team and this fantastic station, this fledgling station that is just
a year old?
Just a year old, and I've only been here for half that year. And so this is a Television Radio Industry Club Award, and the interesting thing about this, this is a news presenter for 2022, which has gone to me, and it's gone to me thanks to you, because it was a people's vote, and we were up against BBC, and Stephen Dixon was also nominated in the last 4 as well, which is absolutely tremendous that both he and I had our names put forward. But there could only be one winner, as they say, these things. So This is
And I have the pleasure of sitting next to him this morning.
Well, this is for Stephen, and this is for Isabel, and this is for Rosie, and this is for anybody else, and anyone who sits behind this desk and does what we do for you. GB News, the People's Channel. Thank you.
Our top story, the only story today. The Prime Minister remains in power after an unprecedented 48 resignations from his government. Now, in the past few moments, the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Brandon Lewis, has resigned from government, as has Care Minister Helen Whatley. Well, let's find out more and head to Downing Street. Our political correspondent Tom Harwood has the latest. Tom, just in the last 10 minutes, 2 more resignations.
Certainly, taking the number up to 48. Helen Whatley, a Treasury Minister, of course. That's not the first Treasury Minister to go, of course. We saw another junior minister in the Treasury, John Glenn, go yesterday. And, of course, Rishi Sunak, one of the people that kicked this all off, going earlier in the week as well. But it's Brandon Lewis who becomes the 4th Cabinet Minister to resign, the 5th member of the Cabinet to no longer be serving in the Cabinet because, of course, Michael Gove was unceremoniously fired last night by the Prime Minister as well. The Cabinet table is getting rather thin. And in the last few moments, just while you were giving that introduction, 2 more Cabinet Ministers walked into number 10 behind me. Chris Keaton-Harris, the Chief Whip, someone who has reportedly been telling the Prime Minister that the game is up, yesterday that is, and Nigel Adams, one of the Prime Minister's closest allies in Cabinet, Minister without portfolio. Both men walked into that door about a minute ago. What might they be saying to the Prime Minister this morning? Might they be tendering their resignations as well? That remains to be seen, but certainly today will be a day of enormous Cabinet pressure. Many people around the Cabinet table tried to do it behind the scenes yesterday, telling the Prime Minister in private that they believe the jig is up for him. Potentially now, we're going to see more Cabinet Ministers stop doing this behind the scenes and make their feelings known publicly. I expect we're going to see rather more Cabinet resignations throughout this morning.
Tom, leave it there. Speak to you later. Thank you very much indeed. We want now to bring in Kevin Ma. Kevin is a former Labour advisor and associated editor of Labour Uncut. Kevin, good morning to you. There he is there. Good man, Kevin. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Yeah. Kevin, you know, I think this Brandon Lewis thing is very significant, and you've got big Irish connections and you're a commentator on Irish politics, amongst other things. You know, I'm just looking at the big deal Boris Johnson makes out of the Northern Ireland Protocol, right? So we're supposed to be renegotiating that. He negotiated it in the first place. Brandon Lewis, I mean, he is the Northern Ireland Secretary, and basically he's saying that Johnson, well, I don't know how to put it politely, but he doesn't know a lot. He doesn't know a lot about Northern Ireland or Ireland in general.
Yeah, Brandon Lewis, I think, is interesting because he's a former chairman of the Conservative Party before he was the Northern Ireland Secretary. So he's somebody that has been, I think, in the kind of camp of loyal followers of Boris Johnson up until this point. So you know, his resignation this morning is significant. That brings the number of cabinet ministers that have quit to 6, which is about 20% of the entire cabinet. So these numbers are kind of completely unsustainable. And it's interesting because, yes, the Northern Ireland Protocol has been this issue that's been rumbling around in British politics for the last 2.5 years. And in some respects, it's the undoing of Boris Johnson, I think, because there's been so much political capital expended in not only negotiating Brexit and creating this Northern Ireland Protocol, but then resigning from the Northern Ireland Protocol that Boris Johnson agreed. And you know, Brandon Lewis has been the front man for a lot of this for the past couple of years. You know, it's very, very difficult to see what happens next, because I mean, there's 2 bills in Parliament about Northern Ireland. One is about the legacy of the Troubles, which is incredibly controversial because it creates a statute of limitations which stops any more investigations or prosecutions relating to Troubles era killings, and that affects ex-British soldiers, but it affects paramilitaries too. And it's one of these rare occasions where literally everybody in Northern Ireland unionist, nationalist victims groups on all sides are opposed to this piece of legislation. It's been kind of rammed through. And the other one is the bill about the protocol and resiling from aspects of the Northern Ireland Protocol. And this is causing a lot of consternation internationally, not only with the European Union, which is threatening retaliatory measures if we do that, but also the Americans as well are deeply, deeply unhappy. And it's limiting any prospect of a UK-US trade deal. So it's going to be interesting to see if Boris Johnson goes, and it looks at the moment like his premiership now has the life expectancy of a housefly. But if he goes and his successor reviews these pieces of legislation, will they want to push them through, or will they want to see them renegotiated and redesigned?
That is the big question, Kevin. Big question indeed. Peter Barnes is beside me. Peter is a political consultant, Kevin. I want to bring him into the conversation with all of this. And, you've had, conservative leanings. You have been a supporter of Boris in the past. But even, stalwarts like Brandon Lewis are now saying, look, no, I've had enough.
Yeah, the resignation of Brandon Lewis is significant, but he's been a stalwart supporter of Boris Johnson since day one, really. He worked in his leadership campaign in 2016 and in 2018. As soon as he went, I think this is kind of the end of it now. Once the big names of the Boris backers, once what were very unfortunately called the Boris bros, once they went, I think the writing is really on the wall now. It's starting to look very likely that Boris probably won't even make it to the end of the day. I do think these latest round of resignations will be significant. If Nigel Adams goes, as Tom Howard's just reported then, if he resigns as well, I think who's another big Boris backer, there's real trouble for him, even more than there already was.
Kevin, I want to ask you then, so that leaves like an open goal, or it should, for the Labour Party. And we've heard Keir Starmer this week saying, oh yeah, bring on a general election. Should he be careful of what he wishes?
Yes, I think you should always be careful of what you wish for, because, of course, we've been here before in Labour history where Margaret Thatcher went in similarly tumultuous circumstances in November 1990. Her cabinet, one at a time, went in to see her and told her that the game was up. So it was really, really dramatic stuff after a decade as Prime Minister. And, of course, what happened then was that John Major replaced her. The public took a look at John Major and thought, we don't really know this guy. He seems like a nice chap. Let's give him a go. And, of course, what happened then was that John Major won the 1992 general election with a record share of the popular vote. It's often forgotten, given he was obviously booted out by a record majority as well in 1997. But certainly at that time, the public sort of said, look, they've changed the unpopular leader. There's been a change of tone, a change of direction. Let's give this new guy a try. And the danger for Labour is, of course, that something similar happens here, where Boris goes and takes with him some of the kind of toxic legacy about the last couple of years of the things that have dogged him, the scandals, all the Partygate stuff and all of that goes, and you get somebody else that comes in with a very different tone, a very different style, and the public take a look and say, okay, let's give this person a go. I mean, I can imagine, the juxtaposition of Boris with somebody like Sajid Javid, for example, who, is a very serious person and somebody that seems, I think, to most voters, a reasonably sincere chap. No, if he were to win, and there's no indication he will, I think it'll be a big struggle for him. But for example, if he were to win, there's enormous symbolism being the first Asian Prime Minister. It would be quite a moment. And again, I think it would help to reset the narrative the Conservative Party's got, and would give it a chance possibly of winning a subsequent general election. We're at that awkward kind of halfway stage in this Parliament where all things are kind of possible. But Labour having Boris Johnson in office, kind of fatally wounded, hold below the waterline, whichever kind of phrases or adjectives you want to use, is probably better for Keir Starmer and Labour than having a new Conservative leader and a new Prime Minister.
So what do you think, as a Labour advisor, Keir Starmer's best strategy is, let's say, even just in the next 24 hours?
I think partly it's don't invade on private grief, as the saying goes. Let the Tory party kind of tear itself apart, because there will be lasting damage. There will be lasting enmities. Whoever takes over, there's going to have to be. Boris Johnson is making it very clear that he's not going quietly, and of course, he will reflect on the fact he won a big significant election victory in 2019. And it's reflected in the people that have been messaging you, I think, this morning, that actually, with average voters, he's still reasonably popular. His numbers aren't that bad. And the Conservative opinion polling is not that bad either. So there's not a sea change that's taking place in British politics right now. It's just the fact that Boris is being pulled down by a combination of his colleagues' sense of self-preservation, and also the sense that there's uncertainty and drift in the heart of government, and I think that's what's doing for him. But there will be a moment in Labour where people think actually there's a level of uncertainty now. But what they've got to try and do, I think, is to say that the Conservatives have been in power since 2010, so this is the 12th year of a Conservative government. We've had 3 prime ministers: Cameron, Theresa May, and Boris, and potentially now a 4th. And the danger is that every time, as I say, it resets and people think, we've got a fresh government, give them a chance. And Labour's got to remind the public that actually the things that are going wrong on the economy are the result of decisions that have been made by successive Conservative governments over this period. They've been in power since 2010. I think we're going to hear Labour people reminding voters about that going forwards.
Kevin, really appreciate it. Kevin Maas, a former Labour advisor and associate editor of Labour Uncut. Thank you for your time and your opinions this morning. Much appreciated. We go back to Peter Barnes, the political consultant beside us here. And Peter, obviously you have Conservative leanings, but I need you to explain to people, because they're just not getting it. People see themselves as an authority on everything. And a lot of them are saying MPs don't have the right. Here's Michael, for instance. MPs don't have the right to make major decisions without taking the majority views of their constituents into account. But the sad news is, can you break the bad news to Michael?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's not how our system works. MPs aren't delegates, they're representatives, so you can't really tell them what to do. I had a feeling when all this kind of started to blow up that this is where the narrative would go, because Boris has a very, very strong supporting base. And I think you said it earlier, that the people who voted for Boris Johnson, because there are now 2 types of Conservative voters, really. There's the Boris voter and the person who votes for the Conservative Party. And it's very similar to like the Jeremy Corbyn situation and his loyal following and the people who voted for the Labour Party. It is going to be somewhat of a headache, this story, for the Conservatives to kind of show that it's not a backstabbing, it's somewhat of a necessity at this point that he's got to go. And it is going to be hard for the Conservatives to win back those kind of voters that see this as a kind of backstabbing moment. How they're going to do that, I have honestly at this moment not a clue. But it will be very interesting to see what the narrative comes once Boris goes and the cabinet kind of gets back together and the government gets on with the rest of the day. But the future is very rocky in terms of what kind of voter is going to come back to the Conservatives. Whether they'll jump back to the Labour Party, these kind of voters, I highly doubt it. But more than likely, they won't vote. And that's going to be a big problem for the Conservatives moving forward, where they're going to need every vote they can get.
Can we just talk about moving forward today? The business of governing. How difficult, or is it actually even impossible, to get on with just running the government today? Because Boris Johnson's got so much reshuffling to do. Does he have enough bodies to fill the gaps?
Well, this is the big thing. There's already been a cancellation of a couple of select committees because the minister doesn't exist anymore. So the business of government is slowly faltering, and it is holding. It could potentially hold up a lot of scrutiny work. It can hold up a lot of legislative work. So there is a consequence to this. There's also what many people aren't really talking about, a financial aspect to this as well, because resigning ministers get 25% of their salary if they resign, and it's now, I think at last count, it was up to about £126,000. It's going to be even more now.
It's just got higher.
It's just got higher.
Damien Hines has resigned.
As Damien Hines gone. So we're now pushing quite a significant amount of money that this is also costing the taxpayer.
This is like payoff they get, is it?
Well, it's a kind of like leaving
parachute payment.
Parachute payments is probably the best way to phrase it. But it's a very underreported aspect of all of this.
Oh well, we're reporting it now. so basically, you would be better off if you're going to go. You don't believe in Boris or whatever. Or you think he's history. You'd be better off resigning because you get 25% of your salary. And then you could be, what if you're reappointed again?
Well, this is the thing. I've been asking around with a few colleagues about what's going to happen once Boris goes. And the consensus seems to be that everybody who's resigned is probably just going to get offered their jobs back. So they're literally just going to walk back in, because the issue with most resignations is it hasn't really been policy. It's been Boris himself. So I think a lot of people will probably just walk right back into where they left off. Where that leaves the Conservatives as a political party, it's probably just the more chaos, and I think a lot of it will kind of roll on into a bigger story about who will end up being the leadership. But there has to be a little bit of research done into how this is actually going to all work out. It's likely that Dominic Raab is going to become the kind of caretaker Prime Minister, because he's the Deputy Prime Minister now. And I know he met with the 1922 committee yesterday. So I think he'll be the one to kind of take the reins once all this mess is over with.
I've got the resignation statement here of Damien Hinds. If you've just joined us, now the 49th person to resign from government. He says it's been a huge privilege and responsibility to serve as Security Minister. It shouldn't take the resignation of dozens of colleagues, but for our country and trust in our democracy, we must have a change of leadership. There we go now. 49 resignations in Boris Johnson's government.
Will we hit 50 before we go off air? Let's find out very shortly. We'll bring that news to you as soon as we get it. Peter, lovely talking to you. He's a political consultant, and a very interesting aspect and technicalities about parachute payments for government ministers. There we go. With that, we'll go to the break. Coming up, we've got the sports news with Paul Coyte talking about last night's victory for the Lionesses, amongst other things. Latest transfer news and what's going on at Wimbledon after the weather.
Good morning, I'm Stephen Keats with your latest Met Office forecast. And some of us will be starting off rather cloudy this morning, but stick with it. Warm sunshine will develop quite widely through the day, although for the far northwest of Scotland, turning a bit cloudy and damp later. We've got this remnants of this weak weather front just clearing away from the south first thing this morning. Otherwise, this ridge of high pressure toppling across the UK. However, waiting in the wings, the next set of fronts, which will be working their way into the far northwest of Scotland as we move on through the day. Elsewhere, though, across Scotland, a lot of sunshine to start off this morning, and that sunshine extending further south as we move on through this morning. And by the afternoon, actually, a lot of places across eastern and southern Scotland, Wales and England, seeing a lot of blue sky, lots of sunshine around. Bit cloudier, though, for Northern Ireland into the northwest of Scotland, eventually with some bits and pieces of rain here. Quite cool, relatively speaking, here. Well, elsewhere, though, lots of warmth to be had, 21 to 23, up to the mid-20s in parts of the south. So a lovely evening to come this evening across good part of the UK, except of course across the far northwest of Scotland, where we've got this weather front bringing further patchy rain and drizzle, mainly for the northwest Highlands, but a few spots getting across the east of the mountains, one or two spots into Northern Ireland too. And a bit of cloud filtering south into some western areas. Clearest weather though across parts of eastern and southern England. Despite this, with the clear skies, the air mass is warming up, so we're going to see those temperatures no lower than the low teens for most of us. So Friday will start off lovely and sunny across many central, eastern and southern parts of England. A bit cloudier further towards the north and west. And the further northwest you go, still a chance of some bits and pieces of light rain and drizzle, parts of Northern Ireland, western and northern Scotland, but not amounting to much through the day. And again, by the end of the day on Friday, a lot of dry weather to be had pretty much nationwide. Perhaps warmer still, though, on Friday afternoon, 27 or so in London, widely high teens to low to mid-20s. Then into the weekend, early part of next week, a lot more dry weather on offer, becoming drier and sunnier, I think, further north as well compared to what we've seen over the last couple of days. And those temperatures starting to climb as well, 30 Celsius possible early next week.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Look at your screen, a magic number. This is breaking news because the number of resignations...
Well, it's 49.
Oh, somebody's teasing me.
It's 49. We've had... This is because the melee of people sending letters, you've got to kind of scour through them very quickly.
Yeah, right.
Because you said, will it be 50 before we go off air? That's not until 9:30. That's 2 hours away. Before 7 o'clock, we already had Brandon Lewis, Northern Ireland Secretary, resign. This morning now, George Freeman MP, UK Minister for Science, has written a letter saying enough is enough, this can't go on. He's written a letter to the Prime Minister saying he no longer has confidence in his leadership. He describes it as chaos. He says the breakdown of cabinet collective responsibility, the abandonment of the ministerial code are all insults to the conservatism I believe and I stand for. So he's made a very clear message to the Prime Minister, say, I no longer have faith in you. You need to stand down.
So that's 2 resignations in the last 15 minutes. That brings us to the 49 tipping point, maybe around 50 is going to be a significant one there. So keep across that, Rosie. Let us know what that is. Back pages of the papers look like this today as we get into sport. Sterling coup. It leads the Daily Mail and a lot of other newspapers. The Mail saying that Chelsea have landed the £35 million signing of the England international Raheem Sterling. Good signing for Chelsea, that one. The Guardian focuses on last night's Women's Euros match. England beating Austria 0-0. More on that very shortly. And the Express looking at Wimbledon. Rafa Nadal's recent injury following his last match. Not his last match at Wimbledon, really. He now looks in serious doubt for his semi-final against Nick Kyrgios. Goodness me, Paul Coit now there for us. And Nadal, tell us, what is this injury?
It's abdominal. It's an abdominal injury because he's had this foot injury for a very long time. He's had it since the start of his career, and that was flaring up, and it looked like that may actually finish his career. And he's playing yesterday, and he was magnificent yesterday. And even with this injury, and if you can imagine, it's a pain around the stomach and around the chest to be able to serve, that's where the pain was.
Yeah.
So he's now going to be playing Nick Kyrgios in the semi-final, which is just going to be just the best semi-final, obviously compared to the other one that's going to be going on as well.
If he does play.
Well, let's just hope he does. I can't see that he won't. It's just not how he is. It's just not how he's built.
Yeah.
I mean, it just shows the resilience of these sorts of players. You know, we look at Djokovic as well. Djokovic was 2 sets down.
Machines.
They are machines, and they know how to win. So just when you think, you know what, it looks like this is the end, they continue. And he's still looking at winning another Grand Slam and doing the whole calendar Grand
Slam. But look, you look at, whatever your sport is, a lot depends on luck. And Kyrgios may just be having that luck.
I don't know whether he is. I don't know whether it is luck, because he does have a huge amount of talent. And finally, and people have been talking about this for a long time and saying that Nick Kyrgios, it's going to happen at some point. But of course, there's this, whether you call it a chip on your shoulder that he has, there's that problem that he has going with it.
If your opponent of the calibre of
I
Nadal
see.
Picks up an injury, that's
100%.
Lucky for you, isn't it?
That would be extremely...
That makes his life a lot easier.
It certainly does, and I don't know whether he'd have much to complain about in that match if that was the situation.
Well, he'll find something to complain about.
Do you reckon?
He will. He'll find something. Oh, incidentally, did I mention I won an award yesterday?
Oh, you didn't actually,
no,
did you?
Well, I did actually, yes.
Can I look at that? that the finest presenter during a sports bulletin. That's magnificent. I mean, congratulations.
Anyway, thank you very
Seriously,
much. Seriously,
congrats.
Thank you, my friend.
Well
thank you. And you have played a part in that, and everybody else.
Oh, bless you.
The Women's Euros, they got underway. It's a win for England.
It is a win for England. So beat Austria 1-0. Serena Wiegmann's side. She said that England were at the start, and I'll do it in the way she was sloppy, a little sloppy. So that's how it started out. But Beth Mead scored the goal. A really interesting goal because the goal went over the keeper's head, a lob over the keeper's head, and it was Manuela Zinsberger, who is the Arsenal goalkeeper, who also plays alongside Beth Mead. So the goal goes over, gets put, the defender kicks it up against the bar.
Yeah.
So it's questionable whether it's gone over the line. Goal line technology says yes. Everybody celebrates. And I think this is the first time I've ever seen this, that VAR...
Overruled.
Well, intervened, but then didn't overrule. So you would think that the goal line technology would be enough. But anyway, for a moment, it was a slight worry. But it's a good result. It's all about momentum in tournament football. We know that. As far as England are concerned in the past, with Euros and World Cup and the men's side, often a slow start, but a 1-0 win, we're off and running. So 70,000 people at Old Trafford and Northern Ireland, Norway tonight.
OK, good. Look forward to that.
That's a big
and it's nice to have a win at Old Trafford. Haven't seen one there for a while. That's good.
Take your trophy and maybe stick it in the cabinet there for a while.
That'll be the only...
It might be the only one for a while.
I'll see for a while. Listen, I think Chelsea have done well getting Raheem Sterling from Man City.
I think it's a really good sign. It's a good signing for Chelsea. Good signing for Raheem Sterling as well. 35 million is what we're looking at. I think it was 50 million that he signed for Man City from Liverpool for. But this is something that could work and could work well. Yeah. Romelu Lukaku has gone, completely different style player. So it's how Chelsea are going to set up with Raheem Sterling. But I think this is something that could work. Very good signing
good for
on
him,
all.
Good for them.
Absolutely, no question. I think it's good
it
for
wouldn't
everybody.
be good for anybody, certainly if you're a Man United supporter, if Chelsea were to nab Cristiano Ronaldo. Because that is also talk there. It looks like United have lost him. It looks like he's going to go somewhere. The Chelsea link keeps coming up because he wants to play Champions League football. But for his legacy, seriously?
I feel the same way. I just think it would be a mistake. I think you've got this wonderful career behind you and this wonderful relationship with Manchester United. I mean, you're a United fan. I mean, you would be upset. And how would then he be looked at if he went to Chelsea or went to another team in the Premier League? It would not be good to go to a rival. If you went abroad, then maybe you could take that and stomach that. But I think to actually go to Chelsea would be a mistake for
Paul Pogba.
He's only good.
We don't care where he goes. But he's gone anyway. Where do you think he's going?
Well, that's Juventus. Back to Juventus. He just seems to go flip-flopping from Juventus, Manchester United. He's not going to be coming back to United again soon. So he's going back to Juventus on a free. And that's another one because I have a feeling that is going to work too. I think that's probably going to suit him better than
fine. I wish the lad well. He just was useless for us.
You don't wish him well, do you?
What?
You wish him well?
Well, look, he's out of us. I mean, he just didn't work for us, so it doesn't really matter to me where he goes.
Absolutely.
Frankie de Jong, it does matter to me where he goes.
Yes.
So Barcelona may be... This is a difficult transfer. Man United are in for this guy.
Yeah.
It looked as if it was happening. Why?
I think this will happen. So Frankie de Jong played at Ajax with Erik ten Hag. So it's another one of the Dutch crew that he wants to bring over. Barcelona, he's a top player. He's a top midfielder. And he seems to be the number one target to go to Old Trafford. Now,
they're going to need him if they're going to rebuild without Ronaldo.
Absolutely. He's the guy that's going to sit in the middle, and I think he's one of the sort of players that you want to build around. Now, Juan Laporta, who runs Barcelona with his iron fist, he's come out and said he's absolutely not for sale. But we all know very well everybody's for sale. But I think it's just a little brinkmanship to Manchester United to say, no, he's our player, we're not going to sell him. But that's pretty much saying, well, we want a bit more money. Keep the money going up and then we'll see where we go. But I imagine that he will go to Manchester United. I really think that'll be the place for him.
Good man, mate. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks for that compliment. Thanks very much indeed. But that's not to say if somebody came in with more money for me that I would go.
No.
I mean, after winning
it's
this...
about the trophies,
I'm a one-station man here. This is what it's about.
The trophies are coming.
This is for the team. This is for the GB News team. Thanks very much indeed, Paul. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Right now, it's at 7:33. The news agenda is changing really rapidly. We want to make sure that we keep you up to date with accurate information. Let's go back to Downing Street to speak to our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, because there's been a letter published this morning from now the Science Minister, George Freeman. Now, Tom, let's be really clear. What exactly has he said? It looks like he's expressing that he has lost confidence in Boris Johnson's leadership.
That's exactly what the letter says, Rosie. In a tweet published by George Freeman, he has said that he no longer has confidence in the Prime Minister and expresses deep regret about that. It goes into some of his work as well. But what it doesn't say, explicitly at least, is that he is resigning as a science minister in the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. So clearly a dissatisfaction with the Prime Minister there, an urging of the Prime Minister to go, saying that he has lost confidence in the Prime Minister. Now, it's a matter of interpretation as to whether or not that counts as a resignation. I've messaged George Freeman this morning to try and get clarification on that point, but I'm not sure that we can quite count it as a resignation in terms. It does seem to be a similar sort of statement to that of the Attorney General, Suella Braverman, who has said much the same thing, however, of course, retains her post in Cabinet as we're speaking. We're in this incredible limbo situation where some people have expressed that they have zero confidence in the Prime Minister continuing as Prime Minister, but somehow remain members of his government. It's a situation of limbo that surely can't hold for very long. But yes, I think as things stand, it wouldn't be wholly accurate to say that George Freeman has explicitly resigned as a science minister. I have to say, I was speaking with him last night and he was saying he was very reluctant to go because he's in the middle of some very big projects, getting a lot of work through international negotiations and projects that are being launched to do with sort of clearing up space junk and everything else, and finance. It's a wide-ranging portfolio and one that he clearly very much enjoys. So perhaps that leads into a little bit of the ambiguity of that statement that we have seen this morning. But clearly the situation is moving so very rapidly. Perhaps there's been clarification while I've been talking to you.
I don't think there has been just yet. What we do know of, Tom, is 49 resignations. We wait to see the intent behind George Freeman's letter. He very clearly says he hasn't got confidence, but as you said, he hasn't explicitly said he's resigned. So we'll try and get clarity on that. In the meantime, Tom, though, you hinted at this, with so many people saying, look, I have resigned, does Boris Johnson have enough people to backfill to get on with the business of the day? If he's saying, I'm defiant, I'm going to stay put for now, can he actually govern?
Well, this is the big question, and it looks like there are some people who have been turning down offers of cabinet posts. There's been one tweet, I believe, by David T.C. Davies today, a Welsh MP, who has turned down the post of becoming the new Welsh Secretary, replacing Simon Hart, who, of course, resigned last night. This is a pretty unprecedented situation, and there's been some speculation that Boris Johnson may start to look to the House of Lords to appoint people to fill up his cabinet. Of course, we haven't seen many Lords sitting in the cabinet of recent time, one notable exception, of course, being Lord Frost, but it's been convention that really the only member of the House of Lords that sits in cabinet usually is the leader of the Lords. Perhaps we might see some more members of the House of Lords entering cabinet to fill up those positions that are left, as fewer and fewer members of Parliament say that they will take those posts. We've also seen a bit of speculation from some people around the Prime Minister that this might be an opportunity to slim down the cabinet. It seems like an awful long time ago, but back in 2019, when Boris Johnson was standing to become leader of the Conservative Party, there was suggestion that he might want a more slimline cabinet, getting rid of some ministerial posts, amalgamating some ministries. Well, if there's any time to make radical reform, it is in these strange times. Of course, we're not expecting this administration to run for very much longer. It does seem to be the case that Boris Johnson has lost the confidence of the majority of his members of Parliament, and at most he might be able to string out his administration through until Monday, 5 tortuous further days of sitting there holed up in Number 10 until the 1922 committee can make their move with a further confidence vote. But it's going to be some pretty testy time before then, and no doubt greater pressure, because that's all that we can see until those formal mechanisms of a no confidence vote can kick in on Monday. All we're going to see is greater and greater pressure.
Tom, thank you very much, live for us there at Downing Street. We're sort of running out of adjectives to describe the peril that the Prime Minister is currently in. 49 resignations. We're waiting to see on that last one if we have reached 50 or not. Of course, a rapidly moving situation, but stay with us. We'll keep you up to date. After the break, we're going to be going through the papers with Liz Kershaw and David Wooding. Don't go anywhere.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello, viewers and listeners. It's time to go through the newspapers now. Joining us in the studio, the political editor of The Sun on Sunday, that's David Wooding, and the broadcaster, Liz Kershaw. Liz, it's you we begin with. In the Times, spying by the Chinese.
Yeah, in other news this morning, but this is huge because it was unprecedented. A press conference yesterday, the head of MI5, the UK intelligence services, and the head of the CIA for the United States. It was a joint press conference, and they were basically saying the most dangerous. We're all distracted, of course, and rightly so, by the invasion of Ukraine, by the Russians, the Russian aggression, and we know about Russian cyber attacks. But the biggest threat is the Chinese, and they wanted to highlight that yesterday. Companies, they said Western companies needed to act to prevent catastrophe or they'd lose billions of dollars. So that's one thing, commercial intrusion. But also military, they're taking, because of the lot more military action in the cyberspace, they're harvesting more secrets about our military capabilities with the intent, the CIA and MI5 was saying yesterday, definite intent to, at some point, when we're distracted, invade Taiwan. Also mounting, influencing attacks on everybody from students to politicians in Western countries.
What's the answer?
To change. Well, they're saying we all need to be more aware of it, therefore put more resources into it, be more vigilant. It is scary. You don't have to invade a country to
rule it,
to
influence it.
To bring down its system of government.
OK, the only thing I'm going to say, that's all terrible and awful and something should be done about it. But they're all listening to us. They're all, I mean, you know, I've just mentioned Paul Pogba. There'll be Paul Pogba stories popping up on my phone now for the rest of the day.
Do you have any evidence to back that up, Eamonn?
Lucy.
They do.
Honestly, it's Rosie. It's fact. I'm telling you. All I have to do is say, you know, I fancy moving house. And that phone will be full of ads about house moving the next day or tickets. I mean,
maybe that's because you Google.
That?
Maybe that's because you
don't
know
moving house. I don't Google it.
Here's one example. This week, I'm reading the papers online, so they all know what you're reading, don't they?
Yes.
And I read this fun item in the Sun. It said, which car do people have most sex in? And I'd read the article and it said, and it was about Volvos, right? And then wiped it away and forgot about it. Since then, every time I go online, I get adverts for Volvos popping up.
Well, why don't you get adverts for sex?
I don't think you can buy that, can you? Said naively. It's just Volvo. I don't want a Volvo.
It is because you clicked on I've just dropped my pen on the floor. It's because you clicked on an article about buying a car.
No, it wasn't. It was about having sex in a car.
Oh my gosh, let's move on.
No, but the thing is...
Said they were very roomy.
David, the thing is, we're talking about here, everybody's listening, everybody's spying. Whether you're Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever the heck it happens to be, whether it's the TV in your sitting room, it's listening to you, it's watching. There are algorithms being developed. They're all at it.
I mean, I feel particularly aggrieved as a journalist because they've put all sorts of restrictions on what we can and can't do, asking people questions, going about our lawful duty. And yet there's people listening to everything we do in the big business world out there, which isn't being looked at all. I mean, apart from what you click on, as Rosie just said, it's what you say. Have you ever had this situation where you've said something in your living room? Oh, I fancy a bar of chocolate. Next minute you look at your computer, it's all on there.
The telly can listen, your phone can listen, and then the thing that we call Amanda in our house, because if you say the name, she switches on. We've had a conversation in the kitchen, and this device is 10 feet away, and the next thing is you're getting adverts. Things, you know, like you might say, oh, I think I'll go to Mallorca this September. And next thing, EasyJet adverts, cheap flights to Palma stop. I think I am being listened. I've got a metal ice bucket, and I put the metal ice bucket over, and I'm a tin hatter in that.
But the irony of all this is we're prepared to accept Chinese spying technology for westernised products, but not when it's working against it. It is. But they're all at it.
I've just got a little bit of breaking news for everybody, if that's OK. Earlier, we were talking about the sort of ticker of resignations, and we said it had been 49. It's now been confirmed from George Freeman, a science minister. He has resigned. It was a little bit confusing because he issued a letter saying he didn't have confidence in the Prime Minister, but didn't actually clarify if he was or wasn't resigning.
Is that the 50th resignation?
That is now the 50th. So...
my world's just collapsed. George Freeman, no.
Well, it's 50 resignations, David. Is that significant?
It is significant. It's a big landmark, and it shows that you know, in any government, you've probably got about 100 or so people. Half of them have gone by the looks of it.
So how does government work from here on in?
Well, it's going to be very difficult because he has to replace these jobs. And we're not just talking about ministers. There's ministerial aides, bag carriers, private parliamentary secretaries. He needs people to take these jobs on. And if one or two people say, I'm not going to take these jobs, then he's got gaps in his government and he cannot form a government. Also, he needs to have quality of people taking these jobs. And if you're scraping the barrel a little bit, you've got a problem.
Okay. Talking about scraping the barrel, food, scraping the pan, scraping the pot, whatever. We go to the Mail, David, double-page spread for them. It is a big thing for our viewers, their readers, and it's food inflation.
Yes, it's they've done a pretty good feature here across 2 pages about the way it's affecting the staples in our diet. And they've done a basket and they've compared the prices with January for these main items, and when they were £36, just over £36, and now they're £40.55.
And the biggest one is the tin of beans. This has been written about before. 33% rise in a tin of beans. If you buy a 4-pack of tomato soup by Heinz, that's going to buy 40%. The biggest things where the prices have gone up seem to be butter, milk, meat and dog food. So if you've got a pet, there's a problem in feeding your pet too. And there was an instance of butter going for £7.25.
£9 odd for a kilogram tub of Lurpak, I read yesterday.
£7.25 it says in Sainsbury's.
And one
staggering,
really difficult component of this is we can see how supermarkets are concerned and also what families, some individuals, are trying to steal from supermarkets because they can't afford it. There's a story in The Sun about alarm tags being put on products, not just like the Lurpak butter that you mentioned there, Liz, but on cheese.
Yes, there's packs of cheddar cheese in Aldi in Wolverhampton which have got these tags on them, the likes of which you only see on champagne or bottles of spirits.
Or legs of lamb.
Well, legs of lamb in the Co-op, they've been put in in Wolverhampton, they've been put in secure plastic containers. So it's clear that people are stealing things because of that, or shoplifting in those areas is more of a problem.
Well, leg of lamb you could get for 18 quid not long ago, and now it's like 36 quid, so it's doubled, not as a consequence of the recent problems.
It will become more of a luxury.
It's a luxury now.
And the other thing is people are moving to own brands. We're talking about the price of a tin of beans there, 90 pence up to £101.20.
But it's
people
interesting,
own brands.
There are some foods that have gone down in price, probably because they're not popular. Pears, grapefruit, a wholemeal loaf, it costs you, £1.18 for a loaf. That's gone up, a white bread loaf. But wholemeal would be 9p cheaper, £1.09 pence. So apples are down to 25p. Grapes are down, because I always thought grapes were expensive. But so there are pears, onions, apples, grapes, wholemeal loaf and grapefruit all down.
So no excuse for not eating fresh fruit and veg.
But you see, is ketchup one of the great luxuries in life or one of the great evils?
You don't need ketchup.
You don't need it. I agree with you. It's up 40%. I mean, when you and I were kids, they never had ketchup.
They did. We weren't allowed any sauces like ketchup or brown sauce or anything in our house. My dad said, you should just taste your food. I've never eaten them. You don't need them, do you? They've no food value, really.
Well, if they're up 40%, it could be a good saving that you're making there as well.
I've started looking at the local shop near me sells fresh meat and veg, which is good, but it doesn't seem to sell. So there's a whole shelf unit full of reduced items. And I've started going in and hoovering them up and putting them in the freezer because, half-price meat and half-price bags of spinach and stuff like that.
Here's a great invention. Talking about technology, we go to the Sun, page 12. Bandages, a new way to apply bandages.
Well, I thought this would interest you. Say goodbye to painful hips. Say goodbye to invasive operations.
Why?
Right, these bandages will be used to repair worn joints and mend even broken bones. Combining the dressings with an injection of stem cells helps cartilage and bone to regrow. So these bandages have got special tiny magnetic particles which are able to turn into bone and cartilage. So, it's the future. Okay. What do you think?
I think very good, very good. Bring it on. And we'll bring you on again, David and Liz, in about 40 minutes' time.
Right now, it is 7:52. It's been quite a busy morning already. If you've just joined us now, 50 resignations in Boris Johnson's government. But he'll say he gets jobs done. One of Boris Johnson's key defences of his premiership has been his success in responding to the war in Ukraine. Now, on Tuesday evening, after the resignations of Rishi Sunak and Sajid Javid, President Zelensky tweeted to thank Boris Johnson for his support. So how's this going down in Ukraine, and what do Ukrainian politicians think of Boris Johnson at the moment? Well, I'm delighted to say that Ukrainian MP Kira Rudik joins us live. Thank you very much for speaking to us. How do you feel Boris Johnson has served President Zelensky, Ukraine and the Ukrainian people over the conflict?
First of all, we are extremely grateful for all the help and support that we have received from the United Kingdom through Boris Johnson. But you need to understand that for us, the support that we are getting is critical for our survival, for our physical survival. So we want to believe that it is not a personal support by Boris Johnson or anybody else, but this is a support of all people of the United Kingdom. And we do hope that no matter who is in the office, this support will continue.
How do you feel
Right.
that some might accuse Boris Johnson of using Ukraine and this conflict as a sort of PR strategy?
In Ukraine, Boris Johnson is indeed extremely popular. And he's popular because he visits a couple of times, and because every time he visits, he not only brings in news, brings in support, actual support that we can see, we can receive, and we can send to our management at the front. So it's like an uncle that visiting always with presence. This is why Boris Johnson is indeed popular.
I've just got to interrupt our conversation very briefly because there has now been another resignation. Let me just bring up their statement. Bear with me for a moment. That means in 51. Guy Opperman, the Pensions Minister, says it's been an honour, a great responsibility to serve as a minister, but we need leadership change and I've resigned. I'll continue to work for my constituents from the back benches. There we go, 51 resignations, a very turbulent day. Still with us, though, on the programme is Kira Rudik, MP from the People's Deputy of Ukraine Party. Just explain to us, as the next sort of days, weeks go on, you've made it really clear that whoever is in charge of the British government, Ukraine is, in some part, very supported by the help that the British government have been able to give. For you, what's the most important thing over the next few days and weeks?
As always, the most important thing for us is weapons. And again, the United Kingdom is one of our closest allies and the biggest donors of the weapons since the beginning of the war. Once weapons started getting to the front, and it took time, and you see that it took time. Sometimes it has been 3 months for certain weapons to reach Ukrainian army and people who are fighting at the front. Once the weapons reach front, you see how well we can use it and how we can advance at certain areas using these modern weapons that we didn't have before. So this is why for us critical to get more and more of that so we can regain the territories that right now are occupied by Russia and restore the sovereignty of Ukraine. This is, I believe, what every single country in Europe and every single country of NATO wants us to do.
Thank you very much for speaking to us, MP there from Ukraine, speaking about the support that the British government have given to Ukraine in the conflict. Really appreciate your time. Just a reminder.
Thank you very much. Yeah, just a reminder,
if you've just joined us.
It's all happening. It's a big, busy news day. Once again, thanks for your company throughout the programme this morning, whether you're listening or watching us. And don't go anywhere because this news will continue to change. We are sitting at government resignations. At what number are we at? 51?
51, as the Pensions Minister resigned just in the last few minutes.
OK. More on that. Who will resign next? The updates to come after the weather forecast.
Good morning, I'm Stephen Keats with your latest Met Office forecast. And some of us will be starting off rather cloudy this morning, but stick with it. Warm sunshine will develop quite widely through the day, although for the far northwest of Scotland, turning a bit cloudy and damp later. We've got this remnants of this weak weather front just clearing away from the south first thing this morning. Otherwise, this ridge of high pressure toppling across the UK. However, waiting in the wings, the next set of fronts, which will be working their way into the far northwest of Scotland as we move on through the day. Elsewhere, though, across Scotland, a lot of sunshine to start off this morning, and that sunshine extending further south as we move on through this morning. And by the afternoon, actually, a lot of places across eastern and southern Scotland, Wales and England, seeing a lot of blue sky, lots of sunshine around. A bit cloudier, though, for Northern Ireland, into the northwest of Scotland, eventually with some bits and pieces of rain here. Quite cool, relatively speaking, here. Where elsewhere, though, lots of warmth to be had, 21 to 23, up to the mid-20s in parts of the south. So a lovely evening to come this evening across a good part of the UK, except, of course, the far northwest of Scotland, where we've got this weather front bringing further patchy rain and drizzle, mainly for the Northwest Highlands, but a few spots getting across the east of the mountains, 1 or 2 spots into Northern Ireland too. And a bit of cloud filtering south into some western areas. Clearest weather though across parts of eastern and southern England. Despite this, with the clear skies, the air mass is warming up, so we're going to see those temperatures no lower than the low teens for most of us. So Friday will start off lovely and sunny across many central, eastern and southern parts of England. A bit cloudier further towards the north and west, and the further northwest you go, still a chance of some bits and pieces of light rain and drizzle, parts of Northern Ireland, western and northern Scotland, but not amounting to much through the day. And again, by the end of the day on Friday, a lot of dry weather to be had pretty much nationwide. Perhaps warmer still though on Friday afternoon, 27 or so in London, widely high teens to low to mid-20s. Then into the weekend, early part of next week, a lot more dry weather on offer, becoming drier and sunnier, I think, further north as well compared to what we've seen over the last couple of days. And those temperatures starting to climb as well, 30 Celsius possible early next week.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Despite 51 resignations from government, the Prime Minister hangs on to power after 5 more MPs quit their roles.
It's been a dramatic morning, but a good morning to you. 8 o'clock on Thursday, the 7th of July. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Rosie Wright. Here's what's leading the news.
The Northern Ireland Secretary, Brandon Lewis, kick-started another round of government resignations today. The total now stands at 51.
Well, it was a very chaotic day for Boris Johnson yesterday. Last night, he sacked the Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove for disloyalty after he briefed the press that the Prime Minister had to go. Other key allies of Johnson held crisis talks in Number 10 last night, with the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, also telling the Prime Minister his time was up.
Speaking in front of the Liaison Committee yesterday, the PM hinted that if Conservative MPs did force him out, he would call a snap general election.
You can join any of our discussions. Please do get in touch on what's been a turbulent day. We'd like to know what you think. Boris Johnson, is he defiant? Is he delusional? Let us know. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk or you can tweet us as well @gbnews.
Well, people quitting the government, but people joining GB News all the time on radio, DAB+, or on television, on our YouTube channel, on so many ways, getting the app and whatever. But thank you. But because of you and because of your loyalty and your like for us, I won this award yesterday with the station. Well, I won it, but it's for the station and it's a good boost for everybody. But that's showbiz for you, isn't it? They do all the work, I get all the glory.
So tell us what the award is.
The award is News Presenter for 2022. The Television Radio Industry Club Big Posh award ceremony yesterday in London. Just absolutely flattered because it was a public vote award, and that shows you're there, you're watching, you're listening. We're glad we're doing what you want. We're glad that you like the station and that you're part of it. Much appreciated. Thank you very much. Well, the top story on this Thursday morning is that the Prime Minister remains in power despite unprecedented 51 resignations from his government.
That's just this morning so far. We've seen the resignations of the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Brandon Lewis, the Care Minister, the Security Minister, the Science Minister and the Pensions Minister.
OK. So for more on this, we're going to go to Downing Street in Westminster. Our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, and the Deputy Political Editor of The Sun, Kate Ferguson, are up with the latest. Tom, we'll start with you for your assessment.
Well, the Prime Minister is in his bunker, hunkered down in number 10, and it feels as if there's a storm brewing, not just in politics, but literally here on the streets. It's the height of summer, and yet it's clouded over, it's chilly, there's a breeze. It feels like the weather is matching the political metaphor here. Perhaps when the Prime Minister resigns, the sun will come out and it will return to normal summer. But literally, the Prime Minister bunkered down in the same way that he described Gordon Brown being bunkered down in the days after he lost the 2010 general election. It seems that the Prime Minister is determined to not bend to pressure from his colleagues, not be swayed by resignations. He will continue on until the bitter end. It seems as though the Prime Minister has simply decided that until a constitutional mechanism is utilised to remove him from power, he is staying where he is. And what does that mean? That means until there's another confidence vote, until the 1922 committee change its rules, as they're likely to do this Monday, and allow members of Parliament to vote upon the leadership of the Conservative Party, to vote confidence or otherwise in this Prime Minister. Until that point happens, until that mechanism kicks in, this Prime Minister is unlikely to go of his own accord.
And Tom, just while you've been speaking, a statement, a letter released by Chris Philp, it's now at 52. He says, "I'm deeply saddened it's come to this, but the Prime Minister should step down, given public and parliamentary confidence has clearly gone. Given the importance of integrity in public life, I'm therefore stepping down as Minister for Tech and the Digital Economy."
So
now
Kate,
at
Kate
52...
Ferguson, you're now at 52, Kate. At what number would it take for Boris Johnson to say, OK, I get the message?
Yeah, it's astonishing, isn't it? It feels like the government is in free fall today. Last night we were up to 40-odd resignations, now 52. To be honest, it's not clear that Boris will go at any number. What is clear is that last night his team was saying that he's going to stay on. He thinks he's got a huge mandate from the British people. And if the Tories want him out of number 10, they're going to have to change the rules and no confidence him. As Tom was saying, we're expecting that to probably happen early next week. But for today, despite the knives being out and really ultra-loyalists now resigning, Boris in number 10 clinging on.
Does the Prime Minister have any path to clinging on to power?
You asking me that one?
Yes, Kate.
Right. I mean, Boris's only hope to stay on is that because we get these 1922 elections on Monday, the idea is that they'll probably change the rules and allow another confidence vote to happen next week. Now, Boris's only chance of staying on really is if somehow that confidence vote he wins, all those rule changes don't go ahead. But increasingly that is looking very unlikely, and he is looking increasingly isolated in number 10. Now what he's saying to Tory MPs is, look, I won you a huge majority at the election, no one else can do that. That mandate is my personal mandate rather than the party's mandate, and that that if you get rid of me, you can't just have whoever you like in number 10. What you will end up having is a snap election, and you will let in they call it a coalition of chaos, a Labour coalition propped up by the Liberals and the SNP. And that will probably lead to PR, constitutional reform, and the Tories could have been out of power for a generation. So that's his argument, that's his big gamble, but it feels like that's not really paying off, and most Tory MPs are not listening to that argument. They want him out, and they want him out now.
Kate, thank you for outlining that and painting the picture. Kate Ferguson is the Deputy Political Editor of The Sun. Tom, just finally with you, is there a mood, is there a feeling there at the moment? How would you sum it up?
Well, I just want to pick up on that point of this threat of a snap election, because this is what dominated the 1922 General Committee meeting yesterday at 5 p.m. I understand from people in the room that really the conversation centred around the possibility of a snap election, whether the Prime Minister could force one through. And the chairman of the 1922 committee, Sir Graham Brady, making it very clear that it would be very hard for the Prime Minister to do that, that the civil service pressure would say that he wouldn't do that, referring to various principles of the British uncodified constitution, that a Prime Minister without the confidence of Parliament is not able to demand an election, that the Queen would be within her right to refuse an election request, because that's what it gets down to. If the Prime Minister demands an election, it's the Queen who can grant it, and that would be the most extraordinary constitutional predicament. It seems as though the Tory party is satisfied, and this is why the rules weren't changed yesterday, why they're satisfied in terms of waiting for those 22 executive elections to happen on Monday, because they're satisfied that they think an election would be unconstitutional, would be impossible to take place now.
Very much indeed there, Tom. We've got to leave it. In the studio with us now, the Conservative MP for Lichfield, Michael Fabricant, ultra-loyalist to Boris Johnson. Michael, what would it take for you to be one of the quit squad, for you to walk up and whisper in Boris's ear, boss, it's time to go?
Such a level that I don't think it would be achieved. I'm actually remaining loyal to Boris. I think he won us the general election, one of the biggest majorities ever. I think he's been bold and imaginative in delivering Brexit, dealing with the pandemic, and also the first country in the world, really, to provide assistance to Ukraine.
All well and good. They all obviously hate him. They can't stand him.
I know.
Right.
Some of them do.
Some of them do. What's the point? Why does he give people like Gove a job? This is politics. Give us the inside track on all of this. Because obviously they can't stand each other. There's no point saying, was it a surprise for you that he called Michael Gove a snake?
Well,
that his people have.
I think, it was all a pretty emotional day yesterday, and it's going to be a pretty emotional day today as well. Why did he choose Michael Gove? Because Michael Gove may or may not be a snake, but he's certainly a very able individual, and that's the key point. If I can just correct something, though, that's been talked about, which is this snap election.
Yeah.
At the liaison committee, which is the committee of all the select committee chairmen, it's the committee of committees, if you like, he was asked about this. Boris appeared, as you know, before the liaison committee yesterday, and Boris Johnson did say, of course, he would not be calling a snap election. So he corrected himself, if you liked. And, of course, Tom Harwood is absolutely right in saying constitutionally he probably couldn't do it anyway, because normally the Queen would say, and it's not for me to say what the Queen might or might not say, but normally in these conditions, she would say, well, hang on for a moment. Does your party have a majority? Yes, it does, almost 80. And we'll say, well, it's up to the party to sort itself out,
Can the party sort itself out? Could the party? It is obviously so very badly fractured between people who have a loyalty to Boris Johnson and people who have a loyalty to the party, as they say it.
Well, the answer is yes, but there's also a no to it. And what do I mean by that? I mean that when Margaret Thatcher went, yes, the party had a mechanism and it found John Major. Now, I got in 1992 when it was John Major, and he won that election, and nobody thought he would, but he did. But you know what? The party was utterly divided. The hatred in the party between those who had supported Thatcher and those who'd helped get rid of Thatcher was tangible. Yeah. And I think that resulted in a parliament which was not effective, and, of course, the huge landslide which brought Tony Blair in. So I'm very, very concerned about where this is all going to lead. But can we find a successor if Boris decides to go? Yes, of course, because there are mechanisms to do that.
Well, we've just heard resignation number 53 now. James Cartledge, as Courts Minister, he says, I feel duty-bound to remain in post because of the very challenging situation in the Crown Court, but it's clearly impossible to continue. Michael, is it possible to continue? What do you think should happen today?
Well, first of all, I would say that, you know, although we're talking about a large number of people who've left, there's about 150 on the payroll. That means government ministers. So about a third have gone, which means that 2/3 are still there. So it's still possible for Boris to carry on. I think what's going to happen is nothing today. Could be completely wrong. The next resignation might be Boris Johnson. I don't know. But I don't think today is the issue. So at 8:41 last night on my phone, I got the message that the elections will be on the Monday, as has been reported, for various officers. Now, they've got to get...
This is the 1922.
This is a 1922 committee, and then they've got to decide how they change the rules. They don't want to keep changing the rules. So if you said, oh, well, there's not going to be a year in between...
I hope that Boris Johnson sees the writing on the wall, reads the optics and says, look, I'll make it easy for everybody and make this painless. I mean, he's only damaging. I mean, look, whether he's right or whether he's wrong or whether he should be there or whether he shouldn't be there, the look is really bad. And surely if he loved the party, and this wasn't just about himself and this was for the good of the party, he would go.
Well, you can say that. I'm not going to say that. What I am going to say is there's just 2 more weeks, next week and the week after.
And then we go on holiday.
Then we go on holiday and we don't come back till September. We're back for 3 weeks and then there's the party conference season. So I tell you what, we've got to sort it out sooner rather than later, and Boris has got to sort it out sooner rather than later. Maybe he thinks that he can keep it going until we go into recess. I don't know. What I do know is that, you know, Boris Johnson feels, and I can understand that, you know, the final straw, the irony, if you like, was the Chris Pincher affair. Now, he was told 3 years ago that there had been an inquiry, there'd been an event. Chris Pincher was found guilty. He'd been rebuked, but that was the end of the matter, and that the complainant was happy with that. So, you know, would he remember that event 3 years ago? I don't know.
Did you know about Pincher? Yes, you obviously did. You'd heard stories about him.
Heard stories about him, but look, you know, he's my next-door neighbour.
So you'd have him in your house, would you?
I've had him in my house. Right. We're next-door neighbours.
Well,
but, you know,
I've never... still happy to have him in your house?
Look, I've never seen him drunk, so I don't know what goes on. I've not been a witness to any of this. I wish I had been there, actually, at the Carlton Club that evening, because I would have said to Chris, you're absolutely sloshed. Get out now. You're behaving badly.
That's not isolated. There's the deputy mayor of Tamworth or something who's now saying that there was a very awful incident between him and Pincher over a number of years. I mean, he's known. His reputation is there. Would you have appointed Pincher to that post of deputy chief whip?
Well, he was a very, very good whip and very, very perceptive. If I'd have known all these incidents, and the Tamworth one is news to me...
Channel 4 News last night.
Does anybody watch Channel 4 News?
I do.
I watch GB News. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I didn't know that. But, look, did Boris Johnson know that? You know, it's just come out, if it's on Channel 4 News last night. Look, it's a difficult situation. It's a sensitive situation. You know, these things should not happen.
Right, here's my point. When you lot all socialise, you all come on here and you do your defence and all that sort of thing and whatever. When you meet and you're in these tea rooms and these bars and you're in the lobby and whatever, what's the crack? What's the talk? What are you saying? You've got these... I mean, you've got people like, you know, Grant Shapps, who's tied at the hip to Boris, and he's gone in yesterday and said, hey, big man, you should go. Is there much of a divide? Is there much hate? Is there much vitriol? What is it like?
No, at the moment it's not hate, it's not vitriol.
Despair?
It's despair, it's frustration, it's how do we dig ourselves out of this hole? Because the nightmare is the nightmare that actually Liz Kershaw talked about. is that you have a general election. We know that Labour won't get an overall majority, that they do a deal with the Lib Dems and the SNP, and that would result in two things. Another decision may be to have proportional representation, which is, of course, what they have in Israel, for example, where they can't get a majority at all. And not only do they keep having elections, mind you, we're in that position at the moment, it seems, but they have very, very weak governments because of this coalition they have to keep forming. So you'll end up with that. You'll end up with, no doubt, Scotland maybe voting for independence. It could see the breakup of the United Kingdom, and I dare say your Scottish viewers may or may not be cheering at that point. But it'll be very, very bad news for the economy of this country, and that's what we don't want to see. By the way, can I congratulate you on your award, but I'm not sure why it looks like a bottle opener.
Yes, it does look like a bottle opener. That's a very good point. Maybe we'll find a bottle.
You did a very large bottle for that one. Michael, thank you very much. Just very quickly, lots of people are trying to petition the Prime Minister today. If you had 30 seconds of his time, what would you say?
I would say, Boris, if there is going to be another vote of no confidence, do you think you could win it? Now, look, it's been reported that the Chief Whip believes that he would only get 65 votes in favour of him, one of which would be mine. But 65 votes would mean a massive loss. He couldn't carry on.
How long does your loyalty last for?
My loyalty? Look, I believe that on balance, he is a superb Prime Minister. I really do. All these difficult challenges he has faced, I don't know anybody else who could have done it in the way that he'd done it. I mean, everybody thought he was mad to go for our own vaccine programme, but he's bold. He's not a details man. That's his weakness. And he's also someone who believes in loyalty. Is that a weakness? I think it's an attribute, actually. But that's how long my loyalty will last, as long as he's Prime Minister.
Michael Fabricant, thank you very much indeed. Michael Fabricant is the Conservative MP for Lichfield. Appreciate it. Thank you. The time, 19 minutes past 8.
Coming up, we're going to be talking about the economic fallout of the political chaos in Downing Street. First, though, the weather.
Good morning, I'm Stephen Keats with your latest Met Office forecast. And some of us will be starting off rather cloudy this morning, but stick with it. Warm sunshine will develop quite widely through the day, although for the far northwest of Scotland, turning a bit cloudy and damp later. We've got this remnants of this weak weather front just clearing away from the south first thing this morning. Otherwise, this ridge of high pressure toppling across the UK. However, waiting in the wings, the next set of fronts, which will be working their way into the far northwest of Scotland as we move on through the day. Elsewhere, though, across Scotland, a lot of sunshine to start off this morning, and that sunshine extending further south as we move on through this morning. And by the afternoon, actually, a lot of places across eastern and southern Scotland, Wales and England, seeing a lot of blue sky, lots of sunshine around. Bit cloudy, though, for Northern Ireland, into the northwest of Scotland, eventually with some bits and pieces of rain here. Quite cool, relatively speaking, here. Well, elsewhere, though, lots of warmth to be had, 21 to 23, up to the mid-20s in parts of the south. So a lovely evening to come this evening across a good part of the UK, except, of course, the far northwest of Scotland, where we've got this weather front bringing further patchy rain and drizzle, mainly for the northwest Highlands, but a few spots getting across the east of the mountains, one or two spots into Northern Ireland too, and a bit of cloud filtering south into some western areas. Clearest weather, though, across parts of eastern and southern England. Despite this, with the clear skies, the air mass is warming up, so we're going to see those temperatures no lower than the low teens for most of us. So Friday will start off lovely and sunny across many central, eastern and southern parts of England. A bit cloudier further towards the north and west. And the further northwest you go, still a chance of some bits and pieces of light rain and drizzle, parts of Northern Ireland, western and northern Scotland, but not amounting to much through the day. And again, by the end of the day on Friday, a lot of dry weather to be had pretty much nationwide. Perhaps warmer still, though, on Friday afternoon, 27 or so in London, widely high teens to low to mid-20s. Then into the weekend, early part of next week, a lot more dry weather on offer, becoming drier and sunnier, I think, further north as well compared to what we've seen over the last couple of days. And those temperatures starting to climb as well, 30 Celsius possible early next week.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
We just want to switch the attention now to economics, and if the Prime Minister does continue, despite those 53 resignations so far, his new Chancellor, who's Nadeem Zahawi, will have to deal with so much, the cost of living crisis and economic downturn, interest rate rises. Let's speak to the economic commentator Laurie Laird on this one. Laurie, first of all, the markets have opened. How are they reacting?
There's not much of a reaction at all. In fact, sterling was down a little bit. Yesterday, when this all kicked off, sterling was down a little bit, but it's down 12% already this year against the dollar. So all of that movement, all of that anticipation of Boris Johnson going, that's already priced into the markets.
I thought markets didn't like indecision.
They don't. You're absolutely right. Markets hate uncertainty. But Boris Johnson's position here has been, at least in the eyes of investors, has been uncertain for months. So I think the markets are looking at this as the beginning of the end, that this will be resolved at some point.
Even though he doesn't see this as the end, the markets have already banked on him going.
Absolutely. And a lot of the movement with sterling came earlier this year, again, down 12%. That's a massive rise, or a massive rise in the dollar, a massive fall in sterling. That's the sort of thing you see for emerging market currencies. You don't tend to see that big of movement in a big major currency. And in fact, yesterday, the FTSE 100 was up more than 1%. That's a big move, up more than 1%. So the markets are pretty unperturbed about this.
What's the reaction to the new Chancellor? We don't know really. I suppose the point is, how long will he be the new Chancellor? Nadeem Zahawi there. And he is planning to reverse Rishi Sunak's corporation tax rises for big businesses, which were supposed to come in at something like 20...
Wanted to bring it from 19% to 25%.
Yeah.
It's a risky move because it will be seen to be benefiting corporations rather than people who are struggling with this cost of living crisis.
Pandemic.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Zahawi has to be very careful that he doesn't fall into the Rishi Sunak trap, which is a very rich member of Parliament, a very wealthy member of Parliament, seeming to be out of touch with people who are really suffering from the cost of living crisis. So he's going to have to tread a very careful line there.
Extremely careful. What do you think his main priority will have to be? And do you think he's actually got the political willpower behind him to actually engineer any change right now?
It's such a good question. And how beholden is he to the Prime Minister? You know, he was appointed yesterday. You would think that it would sort of rob him of a degree of independence, yet he was one of the MPs that went to see Boris Johnson yesterday to plead with him to go. So whether he's independent or not is a open question. He did the broadcast rounds yesterday and wasn't particularly, to my mind, particularly impressive. He was talking about evidence-based policy making. That doesn't mean anything to me. There was no sense of that he understood that people are suffering, that inflation is very, very high, no sense of how he might tackle those things. And it's not just cost of living. We've got labor unrest here, difficult trading relationship with our biggest trading partners. So he's got a lot on his plate. I don't know who would want the job.
Well, Isabel is having a morning line in. She's a morning off today, Isabel, whose half this award goes to, I do have to say. But she just sent me an article written by Boris Johnson some 12 years ago. And this is about Gordon Brown. And it's actually, the irony is shouldn't be missed on any of us. He talks about Gordon Brown. He says, the whole thing's unbelievable. As I write these words, Gordon Brown is still holed up in Downing Street. He's like some illegal settler in the Sinai desert, lashing himself to a radiator. Or like David Brent haunting the office in that excruciating episode when he refuses to acknowledge that he has been sacked. Isn't there someone, the Queen's private secretary, the nice policeman on the door of number 10, whose job it is to tell him that the game is up? How ironic, eh?
This is when journalists become prime ministers. Their words come back potentially to haunt them.
Yeah.
We just had Michael Fabricant on the programme. He's not going to be the person to have that conversation with Boris Johnson. I asked him directly what he'd say to Boris Johnson, and he said he'd be loyal with him until he wasn't prime minister. I have to say, this morning, one Sky News reporter has said that one source has told them parts of Downing Street are preparing a resignation statement, but it's not clear the Prime Minister would read it. Others insist Boris Johnson is pressing on. And that does give you a bit of a picture of how unclear it is, how turbulent the situation is, as Boris Johnson this morning already is facing more resignations from his government. Laurie, we're talking about the economic sort of aftershocks of all of this. If there is a resignation from the Prime Minister, what does that do to markets?
I think, again, markets have really priced this in. I actually think you'll see a rally. I think you'll see a bounce in sterling as and when he does go, simply because the uncertainty that Eamonn mentioned, that is removed from the scenario. Interesting to see who would come next, and I think there will be a little bit of choppiness while the story plays out. Who will be the next Prime Minister? How long will Zahawi be in place? The markets want to see whether there is a plan. Is there a plan to stimulate the economy? The economy is meant to slow down quite a bit. That hits corporate profits. The markets want to see whether the new economic team have some way of raising consumer confidence.
OK, Laurie, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for your economic take on things. Laurie Laird there, the economics commentator. Thank you very much indeed. Now, in public, Boris Johnson appeared twice yesterday to be questioned by MPs as members of the government were resigning, as we say, at 53. Is that where we're at now at the moment?
53 resignations currently. What can we learn, though, from just looking and watching the Prime Minister, from his body language during those performances? Of course, we haven't seen or heard from the Prime Minister yet this morning. When we do, we'll bring it to you here. But body language expert Judy James is with us now. Very good morning to you, Judy. What you saw of the Prime Minister yesterday, how do you infer he's feeling?
We've got two versions at the moment. I mean, we've got the one that is speaking to the nation in emoji. He's speaking emoji, coming directly to the electorate. That's where we got that huge thumbs up on the way into number 10. It was the performance that we got in Prime Minister's questions, where he was ebullient, he was cracking jokes. He made the grilling that he got in Prime Minister's questions look like one of those American roasts where he was in on the joke. Every joke that came at him, he absorbed. He looked absolutely delighted by, and he was very high in energy. But then we got the committee meeting afterwards, and then we got the collapsed souffle version of Boris, because in a way, I think he's got to the point now in his career where that almost doesn't matter. What is he going to persuade those people about? It's detail. He wants now to be the people's princess. He wants to ride in on the voters, on the electorate, who I think he believes still loves him. So what we saw in the afternoon was a very different Prime Minister to the one that we saw in the morning, who was showboating for what he sees as
Judy,
his prime audience.
We're going to have a look at what we did see in the afternoon, and this is at this liaison committee meeting, and this is what you would term, let's watch this, as an angry Boris Johnson. Let's take a look at this.
But next week, I'm here to, rather than giving any running commentary on my own career, I'm here to talk about what the government is doing, and that is so that's what I was telling Stephen, and we're doing a lot.
OK, tell us what you think.
Well, I mean, getting pelted verbally, so he hunkered in. He tends to go into hedgehog mode, so he was curled slightly, his arms on the table, still trying to look calm, but we can see by that accelerated blink rate that he's still got that idea that I'm the Prime Minister and this is rather annoying to me. Don't keep asking me the detail. And we got a lot of gesticulation that very much said, no, don't bother about the detail. It's not worth it now. We got a lot of closing down gestures and a lot of glancing to one side as though he was saying, right, next question. So very low performance, very high on impatience and annoyance at that point.
OK. Well, there's two other clips we have for you. This is what you term a confident Boris Johnson.
I look at the issues that this country faces. I look at the pressures that people are under and the need for government to focus on their priorities, which is what we are doing. I look at the biggest war in Europe for 80 years, and I cannot for the life of me see how it is responsible just to walk away from that, as I said earlier on in PMQs, particularly not when you have a mandate of the kind that we won 2-3 years ago.
And we want to take that clip and compare it to what you term a dejected Boris Johnson. Then we'll talk about both. Here he is, dejected.
I look at the issues that this country faces. I look at the pressures that people are under and the need for government to focus on their priorities, which is what we are doing. I look at the biggest war in Europe for 80 years, and I cannot for the life of me see how it is responsible just to walk away from that, as I said earlier on in PMQs.
OK, everybody looking for the signs, Judy, whether he will resign or not. You put it all together, what would you say?
I would say that Boris is probably tossing it. I think he's got a lucky coin in his pocket, actually, Eamonn, and I think that's how he's making his decisions right now. I would say from this is very much the clips that we're just seeing. My country needs me, is his message there. This is not the time to leave. He's looking like a man that wants to get back to get on with the job. But again, we've got a kind of low energy here and dejected. The one that was in Prime Minister's questions, that guy, I think you would have to drag out kicking and screaming in handcuffs.
OK. Judy, thank you very much indeed for your take on things. Judy James is a body language expert. Thank you.
And what's your sort of take on Boris Johnson? Defiant, dejected? Has it changed this morning? We haven't heard from the Prime Minister. Well, we probably will do at some point today. Right now, they're at 25 to 9. It's been a dramatic day, but we're going to be going through the papers with Liz Kershaw and David Wooding. Don't go anywhere.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Commentary in the newspapers today to discuss with David Wooding and, first of all, Liz Kershaw. Liz, we go to the page 17 of the Daily Mail, and this is a commentary by Daniel Johnson. The headline is, PMs should be ousted by the people, not a bunch of TV pundits and bureaucrats deranged by Brexit hatred. Discuss.
Well, I tweeted yesterday, why don't we just scrap general elections, save a lot of time and money, and just let Beth Rigby and her mates decide who runs the country? It's got about 3,000 likes on Twitter, and I don't have the millions of followers that you did. So there's a lot of empathy with that sentiment out there today. Somebody made a comment outside Number 10 last night. One of the journalists said, there's 150 of us here. It's a big day for politics. It's a big day for journalism. I get back in your box. Yes, you have an important role, and I really respect the journalists that I know, like David, etc. On the other hand, they should not be dictating who runs this country. And they've been conducting a witch hunt against Boris Johnson since the day he was elected. And, the gift that keeps on giving popped up then, Dominic Cummings, to give them ammunition, including possibly photographs. It's been everything from wallpaper to the one party that Boris was proved to have attended and paid a fine for, is given people the benefit of the doubt because, as I said earlier, I think at the end of the day he's a nice guy. He wants people to have their freedoms and he's just been pilloried throughout. Anyway, they're rubbing their hands in glee now. And if you ever thought, this article is in the Mail, PMs should be ousted by the people, not a bunch of TV pundits and bureaucrats deranged by Brexit hatred, writes Daniel Johnson. So a strong headline as well. But, if you've got any doubts now about, I wonder if that person who presents that programme on the television has this political view. Well, there's New Statesman, which is a Labour left-wing magazine. Big article on the front page, picture of Boris with a Pinocchio nose on fire. Andrew Marr writes, so as soon as he's out of the BBC, we now know his colours. But the fact that these people have been manoeuvring and have kind of panicked MPs, all these 53 resignations we've seen today, some will be genuinely based on their convictions. Others are just running scared because they know that the press will pile into it. I mean, the next person who's elected as PM, as soon as they're in the job, the papers will start on them in the same way.
And previous Prime Ministers are talking about their experience, their last day in Number 10. This is in the Times too.
Yes. They've done a rather interesting feature about Prime Ministers and their final days and the leaving of Downing Street, walking out of that big black door for the final time. Now, I've been there to witness a few Prime Ministers leaving, and no matter how you've got on with them, whether you support their politics or not, I always feel a little bit choked up because it's a sad day. It's a really emotional day for them. And the one that hit, was Margaret Thatcher, a great picture. I think it was The Sun which had it on the front page, caught through the car with a tear in her eye, the Iron Lady melting. That was quite an iconic picture. Then, of course, David Cameron, when he left, he did a little hum, if you remember. He gave his speech at a hum. That's right, which was quite strange. And Theresa May, she was quite choked up. She was very, very deeply choked up.
Gordon Brown was emotional.
Gordon Brown was the one that really got me. I mean, he'd had a terrible time as Prime Minister. He was a bit of a flop. And when I saw him with his two little boys walking out, I actually did well up. And I thought, if we'd seen more of that of Gordon Brown, he may have lasted a little bit longer. And this piece is saying, how brutal, swift and cruel it can be. Yeah. And what do they do when they leave? Do they have time to clean the little bits of rotting lettuce from the bottom of the fridge? Do they get the bubble wrap around their goods? I mean, do they in fact leave the loo rolls for the people who are behind?
It's like anybody who's been in a job for a long time. I mean, you're basically told to clear your desk and get out, I suppose.
Yeah.
I always think the same. I mean, it shouldn't just be the preserve of prime ministers or football managers or whatever, but it's sad for anybody who has to leave their job. And then all this business, it's never happened to me, but I mean, when people are told they've been somewhere for years and it's just, you can't come back into the office, you can't have access to your desk or your computer, your stuff will be put in a box and you're out. It is cruel for everybody.
It is
That's
cruel.
life.
I mean, when Carrie will have her ABBA CDs up in the flat of the shop.
Yeah, they're losing. They're
They're
losing their. They've probably got another one, but they're losing their place, their residence as well, aren't they? Their home.
David, the question is, this piece is about examining previous Prime Minister's last day. Even in the time this programme's been on air, the situation's shifted significantly. Do you think this is Boris Johnson's last day?
It could be. Again, the question is, does he do it in daylight or not? Now, I understand from past memory that Gordon Brown did it in the morning because he didn't want to be walking out in darkness because it gave a different image. He'll obviously, if he is ready to go and he's penning his final speech, he'll want it to be right and say the right things and get a few home truths of that. I mean, I think we're in the end game here. We're in the end of political life care for the Prime Minister at the moment.
How much will he be thinking about his legacy in how he decides to leave?
Well, I mean, we all know his legacy already. He's delivered Brexit. He saw off the Marxist, anti-Semitic Labour Party as it was under Jeremy Corbyn, and he did a great job in the vaccine rollout. I think we'll remember that. But the problem for Boris Johnson, in the same way for Tony Blair, who did some great things on education, reforms and getting people back off benefits and into work, he'll be remembered for Iraq, and Boris Johnson may well be remembered for Partygate and Pinchergate.
What kind of country are we, though, where the head of state, in all but technicality, I know the Queen's head of state, but the most senior politician in the land can just be removed, voted in democratically in a general election, and before the term's out, they're out. So we've now got Boris Johnson, Theresa May, David Cameron, Tony Blair, Margaret Thatcher. Going back now to 1979, Margaret Thatcher being elected, 5 prime ministers who've been removed not by the electorate, but by their own parliamentary party MPs and stirred on by the media. It's wrong.
What will Theresa May be thinking here? Because Boris Johnson effectively knifed her
and
took her job. She will be sitting on the back benches wondering, well, what goes round comes around.
Well, she was about 3 rows back on the end of the aisle yesterday, behind Boris and his front bench team, and she just looked so distraught and depressed. I'd love to have known what was going through her mind.
Right, let's go to the Telegraph. We're talking about second homes here, Elizabeth. Why's this caught your eye?
Well, because I remember when I was a kid from the northwest and we'd go to North Wales for our holidays, you know, the Glen Peninsula and Anglesey, and there was a lot of cottage burning. The Welsh nationalists setting fire to English people's holiday homes, and I thought the days of that kind of envy and hatred had gone. But Mark Drakeford, the First Minister of Wales, has proposed recently a 300% rise in council tax for people whose houses and flats in Wales are not their primary homes. However, there's a loophole. So he's got a chalet. They're very luxurious and they cost about 180,000, some of them. He's got a chalet, but that won't be counted as a second home. The technicality is that on many caravan sites and chalet parks, you can't live there 365 days a year. So he doesn't have to
the
pay.
tax.
Yeah.
Liz, I'm only interrupting you
go on.
because Rosie will have some breaking news. David, it'd be very significant here for you and your comment on it.
Yeah, we've just had a statement issued by Nadeem Zahawi, who says to the Prime Minister in a letter, this is not sustainable. It will only get worse for you, for the Conservative Party, and most importantly, all of the country. You must do the right thing now and go. We can bring up that letter there. You can see it. And he actually gives us detail into what happened yesterday. He said, I made it clear to the Prime Minister alongside my colleagues in Number 10, there was only one direction where this was going. he should leave with dignity. Out of respect and in hopes that he would listen to an old friend of 30 years, I kept this council private. Well, private no longer, he says. He's
and
heartbroken.
I took the job as a chancellor. Right, you know, what is this world of politics?
Well, there was chatter among MPs yesterday that Nadeem Zahawi was regarded as a possible front runner for the leadership. Had basically blotted his copybook by accepting that job.
Yeah.
What he's done now is he's shown a bit of loyalty towards the Prime Minister for the Conservative members out there who will have a say in the vote. But now he's trying to do the right thing by the Prime Minister.
Do you think he will stay on as Chancellor or will he go the whole hog?
Well, I'm not sure whether he's going to resign from that. Perhaps he will. I mean, everybody else has gone.
So if he resigns from that, that's a shoe-in for Liz Truss?
Possibly, yes. I would say as well, Liz Truss has stayed loyal to the Prime Minister, but not actually said anything. So she's still in there.
Keeping her options open.
But Nadeem Zahawi hasn't resigned. I'm told Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, has also told him that he should go, but hasn't resigned.
Liz, sorry for interrupting you there. And your point overall about the Welsh First Minister is that this is just double standards and hypocrisy, or he hasn't done anything wrong at all.
No, it's just an anomaly. Whether or not he was conscious of this when he devised the new legislation, we can only speculate. Second homeowners, if they let out the properties for a certain portion of the year, they can get exemption from this council tax. But I'd just like to say they bring a lot to the local economies, where they bring holidaymakers in, they spend money in pubs and restaurants.
Yeah. Liz, I'm interrupting you again.
Oh,
sorry,
no, go on.
because obviously we've got Tom Harwood at Downing Street just to bring us this Zahawi bombshell. Tom?
Yes, it's a letter that I suppose was inevitable from the reports that we were seeing yesterday and the knowledge that Nadeem Zahawi, along with other cabinet ministers, went in private to the Prime Minister, telling him that the jig is up, basically, that he should go with dignity. And now these people who were saying this in private yesterday are starting to say so in public today. I think it's really interesting that in Nadeem Zahawi's letter to the Prime Minister, he's trying to sort of build an off-ramp for the Prime Minister, listing the Prime Minister's successes. He says that no one will forget getting Brexit done, how the country was steered through COVID, the support for Ukraine, and indeed, perhaps most importantly, keeping a dangerous anti-Semite out of number 10. Nadeem Zahawi's words there. Perhaps Boris Johnson will be best remembered for the crushing defeat of Corbynism and radically changing not only the face of Parliament in his big majority, but how the Labour Party is run too, squashing Jeremy Corbyn's legacy there. It's interesting that off-ramp, perhaps, talking about the legacy of the Prime Minister, talking about all that he's achieved in the last 3 years. Perhaps that is the way to convince the Prime Minister that this is coming to a close now, talking about not the fact that he must go and how messy everything looks now, but what this Prime Minister has achieved in the last 3 years. That being said, no significant signs now yet that the Prime Minister will bend to this pressure. The Prime Minister still, as things stand, sticking to that principle that he wants to see the parliamentary party vote, a vote which can't take place until early next week before he moves. It doesn't look like the Prime Minister wants to be forced out. He wants to go down fighting.
This is fast moving. We're going to one of our viewers now, Steve Edwards, who's from Cleethorpes in Lincolnshire. And the question is, Steve, just be interested in you, do you admire the Prime Minister for standing firm, or is he beginning to irritate you, or do you think he's doing the right thing for the country as opposed to himself? Just gauging reaction. What do you think?
Well, the situation's changing by the minute, and head-scratching moments. I admire Boris Johnson. I voted for him. I've supported him all the way along the line, and I still do. Like Michael Fabricant earlier on, he says that we should support him. Loyalty is a big thing. And I'm loyal to Boris. And I think that, my vote is still with him.
Yeah. So at what point, I mean, you think he should stay then?
Well, obviously the 1922 committee is going to be the big test. If they change the rules and they hold a result and he loses that, then obviously he has to go. And then what we've got then, I have just no idea how the situation will develop from then on. It's chaotic.
How much damage do you think Boris Johnson's going to do to the Conservative Party with this strategy of currently staying put? And do you feel sort of resentful towards him for doing that?
No, I don't feel resentful. I am, like some of the other viewers, very angry with the way he's been treated from day one, with all the stuff that he's had to deal with, the pandemic, now the war in Ukraine, the economic situation. A lot of this hasn't been his fault. Yes, he's made mistakes with the detritus, if you like, of running the government with the individuals who have really let him down. But they've let him down. And the Partygate, for me, is just insignificant. Most of us broke the rules during Partygate anyway, so I'm not really concerned with that. But certainly the way that the press, and with all due respect to the press, they got to report this stuff. But at the end of the day, they really hounded him. Every single time we pick up the paper, there's a drip against Boris.
But Steve, you can't deny the news. I'd love to be able to give you all the news you all want to hear. But here's a fact. The Education Secretary who was appointed yesterday, Michelle Donnellan, she's walked as well. She's out today. So at what point, Steve, do you wake up and smell the roses?
Well, I can't disagree with you, Eamonn. It's just chaotic. The notes that I made last night, they've all changed for today's interview. So it's changing minute by minute. I honestly don't know. My heart of heart thinks that Boris will go. He'll have to. But I am pretty angry with the way he's been treated. So that may well reflect in a future election.
I think these people like Michelle Donnellan, like Nadeem Zahawi, do you think they're traitors?
Well, I think they're certainly looking after their own self-interests, but that's what politics is, and that's what they do. We've seen this. I remember the Thatcher problems. I was still around then. In fact, I was a police officer during the 70s and 80s when this stuff was happening. So I've seen it before, seen it with Major, seen it with of course Theresa May, and now seeing it with Boris. The Conservatives are a treacherous lot, and I'm a member.
Well, listen, really appreciate you taking the time, Steve, getting out of your bed, talking to us, watching the programme, listening to the programme. Great to have you on board, mate, and thanks for speaking to us all the way from
Congratulations on your award.
Oh, thanks, mate. Did you vote for me?
Oh, yes.
Oh, good.
Vote early,
Steve,
vote often.
And Rosie, everybody else.
That was a risky question,
Thank
Eamonn.
you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Cheers, Steve. Thank you. Get in touch again, Steve. There's Steve. Steve's from Cleethorpes in Lincolnshire. He's a retired police officer. He's just expressing his views. We try and involve you, whatever those views are. We want to hear from you, and we try and reflect those. So remember, we are GB News. We like to think we are the people's channel.
And quickly, Steve, not got dissimilar views to Robert, who says, I laugh when I see these ungrateful rats leaving the ship. Not everyone wants our Prime Minister to leave at this time. We're in a real crisis, and the idiots that want to get rid of the best Prime Minister we've had in a long time. Well, Robert, thank you for your message as well. And you can have your say as well. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Don't go anywhere.
Yeah, we're going to take a very short break. Goodness knows who else will have resigned in that time. Maybe Boris after this.
Good morning, I'm Stephen Keats with your latest Met Office forecast. And some of us will be starting off rather cloudy this morning, but stick with it. Warm sunshine will develop quite widely through the day, although for the far northwest of Scotland, turning a bit cloudy and damp later. We've got this remnants of this weak weather front just clearing away from the south first thing this morning. Otherwise, this ridge of high pressure toppling across the UK. However, waiting in the wings, the next set of fronts, which will be working their way into the far northwest of Scotland as we move on through the day. Elsewhere, though, across Scotland, a lot of sunshine to start off this morning, and that sunshine extending further south as we move on through this morning. And by the afternoon, actually, a lot of places across eastern and southern Scotland, Wales and England, seeing a lot of blue sky, lots of sunshine around. Bit cloudy though for Northern Ireland, into the northwest of Scotland, eventually with some bits and pieces of rain here. Quite cool, relatively speaking here. Where elsewhere though, lots of warmth to be had, 21 to 23, up to the mid-20s in parts of the south. So a lovely evening to come this evening across a good part of the UK, except of course the far northwest of Scotland, where we've got this weather front bringing further patchy rain and drizzle, mainly for the northwest Highlands, but a few spots getting across the east of the mountains, 1 or 2 spots into Northern Ireland too. And a bit of cloud filtering south into some western areas. Clearest weather though across parts of eastern and southern England. Despite this, with the clear skies, the air mass is warming up, so we're going to see those temperatures no lower than the low teens for most of us. So Friday will start off lovely and sunny across many central, eastern and southern parts of England. A bit cloudier further towards the north and west, and the further northwest you go, still a chance of some bits and pieces of light rain and drizzle, parts of Northern Ireland, western and northern Scotland, but not amounting to much through the day. And again, by the end of the day on Friday, a lot of dry weather to be had pretty much nationwide. Perhaps warmer still though on Friday afternoon, 27 or so in London, widely high teens to low to mid-20s. Then into the weekend, early part of next week, a lot more dry weather on offer, becoming drier and sunnier, I think, further north as well compared to what we've seen over the last couple of days. And those temperatures starting to climb as well, 30 Celsius possible early next week.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
The newly appointed Chancellor Nadeem Zahawi calls on the Prime Minister to go as the number of resignations now reaches 54.
And counting. A very good morning to you. It is 9 o'clock. It is Thursday, the 7th of July. You're tuned into breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes, and today, Rosie Wright.
A rapidly developing morning. Here's what's leading the news. So 54 government ministers have resigned their posts. The Prime Minister is hanging on to power, but for how much longer? The Education Secretary, Michelle Donnellan, appointed on Tuesday, has been the latest person to hand in her resignation.
But will she be the last? This comes after a chaotic day for the PM yesterday. Key allies telling him his time was up, including Michael Gove. We're yet to hear from the Prime Minister today, but speaking in front of the liaison committee yesterday, he hinted that if Conservative MPs forced him out, he would call a snap general election. Now, you've been having your say on this, have been reflecting on it, and one of the things we want to discuss very, very shortly with the expert beside me now, Matt Goodwin, is this is like a divorce in many ways, and you think, what will happen to me? Will I keep the house? Will I get the car? Do I get the dog? Whatever. People are worried. People like you are worried, will you have the voice? If Johnson was to go, who would then represent you? Get in touch with us, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet at gbnews.
So to our top story, the only story. The Prime Minister currently remains in power this morning after an unprecedented 54 resignations from his government. The newly appointed Chancellor, Nadeem Zahawi, as we just told you, is also the latest to say the Prime Minister should go. Well, let's find out more and go right to Downing Street. Our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, is there. Tom, it's been about as bruising as it could have been over the last few hours. And the latest now from Nadeem Zahawi, this is getting more and more untenable, surely, for Boris Johnson.
Certainly, it's getting untenable. It's not just those people who are resigning, who have been in the cabinet for a while, not just junior ministers either, but people who were appointed to the cabinet a matter of hours ago, now resigning. Michelle Donnellan, about 36 hours ago, became Secretary of State for Education. She had been Universities Minister for some time, and now she has resigned. But not only has Michelle Donnellan resigned, all of the other junior ministers in the Education Department have resigned. There are currently no education ministers of this government. And that's a picture that we can see elsewhere in other departments too. And this really grinds government to a halt. There's business that government does on a daily basis, things that need to happen, ministerial diktats that need to take place. One of the reasons people are suspecting that the Home Secretary hasn't resigned is because vital work from security services, MI5, MI6, needs to be signed off by the Home Secretary sort of as and when. There's crucial business of government that needs to take place, and in so many areas it's grinding to a halt now because these ministers are dropping, frankly, like flies. There are several bill committees today in Parliament that simply will not be able to do their job because there is no minister to steer the bill through Parliament. We are really seeing utter gridlock, not just the sort of carousel, the rigmarole that's going on here in Downing Street, but the job of government is absolutely collapsing right now. It's very hard to see how this limps on much further. From the Prime Minister's perspective, he's got two options. Either he can listen to the increasing cries from his cabinet, really, and others within his party. Indeed, no doubt, some friends of his too, saying that he should go with dignity now, or with what little dignity he can muster. The other hand, though, everything that we've seen from this Prime Minister so far, he wants to stay there until a potential vote of the 1922 committee, a potential vote of no confidence at the start of next week. Those are the two options. It's not looking good either way.
Tom, thank you very much indeed. Tom with his own show, of course, from 10:30. Matt Goodwin is an academic and professor of politics. So we're going to talk about the future of the Conservative Party, the future of Boris Johnson, and who's going to resign next. And as to, Matt's been looking at the whole trends and strategies and what the polls are actually saying. Good to see you, Matt, on this. We asked the question, we posed the question on behalf of our viewers and our listeners. A lot of them will say, this man delivered my dream, delivered my wishes. If he were to go, is there a successor or is their voice dead?
I think that's one of the really important questions. We're not only debating what happens to Boris Johnson, we're now going to debate what happens to his mandate from the 14 million people in 2019. And as you say, Eamonn, what those people wanted was a break from the consensus that has dominated the country for 30, 40, 50 years. And they looked to Johnson to lead the country out of the European Union, reform migration, rebalance the country away from London, give more to the small towns, the coastal towns, the countryside, restore Britain's identity, history, traditions, all that sort of stuff. And I think now that voice really has to shape the Conservative leadership election to come. Because, Eamonn, there's a question here now which is going to bubble to the surface in the next 2 days, which is what kind of party does the Conservative Party want to be? Does it want to fall back into its comfort territory put on the comfort blankets, go back to Margaret Thatcher in the 1980s? Or does it want to embrace this new electorate that Boris Johnson mobilised in 2019, and an electorate that's become steadily disillusioned with Johnson's premiership over the last 2 years? This is a really important, profound question for the Conservative Party.
Do you think those two different visions have different figureheads?
Absolutely. I think if you looked at somebody like Jeremy Hunt, you're looking at somebody who is representing what I would argue is a school of thought that no longer really is in touch with where the country is today. If you look at a new generation of Conservatives, you look at, say, Kemi Badenoch or Miriam Cates or Suella Braverman, people like that, they are talking about very different issues. They're saying, actually, you know what, people don't just care about economic freedom. You know, Margaret Thatcher talked a lot about economic freedom. What they're saying is they also care about cultural freedom. They don't want this sort of illiberal liberalism spreading across British society. They want to defend and uphold history, traditions, culture. They don't want kids being politicised in schools.
Yes.
They don't want all of this sort of woke stuff in institutions.
All very noble and laudable, but the problem with most of those people you have just mentioned is none of us have ever heard of them. And that's where he is different. I mean, he was the architect of his own downfall in many ways. I mean, he did the hard bit, and then he couldn't maintain it. But he had profile. And after this, I mean, he's not done after this. He will be a massive telly star and media star and on the speaking circuit and whatever. So he's not going to go away. But can you do all those things without profile?
Look, very few people had actually heard of Margaret Thatcher outside of Westminster before she became...
That was before social media.
What she became. By the end of this summer, we will all be having a national debate about who is going to take over the Conservative Party and become the next Prime Minister. All of those people will now be putting forward, as you've already heard this morning, putting forward their ideas for what makes them different from their counterparts. And this is going to be, I think, one of the most important moments for the Conservative Party, really, in its history, because if it gets this wrong, if the Conservative Party goes back to the same old ideas, the same old ideology, the Conservative Party will end up suffering a massive defeat at the next general election.
So we're going to see a new creature, a modern conservative.
Well, we're in the post-Brexit reality, right? Post-Brexit conservatism has to be fundamentally different from pre-Brexit conservatism. The next leader of the party has to say, I have an idea for holding the Red Wall and the Southern Shires. What is that idea?
I've just got a little bit of breaking news for you all, for you both, for you at home. Another resignation, this time now from Caroline Johnson, who says, it's with deep sadness I'm writing to you to resign as Vice Chair of the Conservative Party. That now makes 55. Surely that means this is now becoming impossible for the Prime Minister to cling on.
He's got to go. I mean, he's damaging his party, he's damaging the country, and he's damaging his legacy. And Eamonn is right. Boris Johnson will remain a highly influential, consequential voice in British politics for years, if not decades to come. But his premiership now has come to an end. And if he goes today, out of interest, it's 2 years, 348 days, exactly the same as Neville Chamberlain, a little bit more than Gordon Brown, a little bit less than Theresa May. But for many of your viewers, I suspect, they will feel disillusioned, they will feel fed up, they will feel disappointed, they will feel angry, they will feel as though that big promise that was symbolised by Johnson has now come to an end. And through many of his own errors, this isn't a Remain plot. Many of the people who are leaving are leavers. Johnson has ultimately only himself to blame for this chain of events.
I agree with you, and I would say to people, you know, many of you will believe it's a media plot. Many of you will believe that it's a conspiracy and whatever. But a lot of you have got to look and say, how much did this man bring upon himself? However, that's the fear, and there's no point pointing fingers or, you know, the blame game or whatever. These people, all of those people, who do they look to? That's what, I mean, that's basically what we were saying there. Rosie was saying, who succeeds, what type of person we were talking about. So we know the people who are disenchanted with what's going on at the moment. Who have they got to win over? Who can they keep? We talked about the Red Wall last time. Is that where the concentration should be? Or is it a whole new raft of young people and the ideas that they have for a modern world?
I think if you were being ruthlessly pragmatic about the next general election, and you were advising the Conservative Party, you would say to them, look, London is not going to come back to the Conservative Party at the next election. University towns aren't going to come back to the Conservative Party at the next election. Your primary mission as the next leader of the Conservative Party is to offer an appealing, credible message to the groups that have been turning to the Conservative Party over the last 5 years. Non-graduates, working-class voters, people over the age of 55, small towns, coastal towns, non-London England, people who feel that for the last 50 years they've been on the wrong side of this political, cultural revolution that's been led by London and the graduate class. And whoever takes over the Conservative Party, if they speak to that audience in an authentic, credible, appealing way, they will win the next election.
We may have an election very, very soon. Matt Goodwin, you're a fascinating man. Very, very amazing to hear what you believe the future of the Conservative Party may be. We may find out that right now as we cross to Downing Street. Tom Harwood is there with some breaking news. Tom.
The Prime Minister has decided that he will resign today as leader of the Conservative Party. This is something that has been a fairly long time coming now. It was becoming more and more inevitable. The statement is, we hear, being drawn up now in the building behind me, and within hours we may well see the Prime Minister step out of that shiny black door to a podium perhaps that will be erected in this very street to make that statement. The Prime Minister will be resigning as Tory party leader, but not for the moment as Prime Minister. Under this plan, the Prime Minister will remain in place as a sort of caretaker through the process of a Conservative Party leadership election. Now, the process last time, while Theresa May was Prime Minister, she resigned as Tory Party leader, and then 46 days of leadership contest took place. Of course, there first have to be rounds within Parliament. The system that the Conservatives use is that MPs vote to whittle down the number of candidates to 2, who then go out to the Tory party membership at large. They hust across the country and vote by post, and then a new party leader is announced. At that point, the Prime Minister would be replaced with a fresh Prime Minister. So under this plan that Boris Johnson is to be setting out in a matter of hours, he resigns today as party leader, but remains as Prime Minister perhaps for another month until a new replacement is agreed upon by the membership of the Conservative Party.
So there you have it. Boris Johnson is going to resign at some point today. Of course, we'll bring that to you here on GB News. A very quickly developing story. Tom, just take us through what happened this morning, because it really, even before 7 o'clock, we had another cabinet member
It was
resign.
Zahawi was the key to this, wasn't he?
So talk us through the timeline this morning.
Yes, well, of course, we had Simon Hart resigning last night, the Welsh Secretary, Brandon Lewis, the Northern Ireland Secretary, resigning this morning. And then we just saw more and more resignations and indeed statements of intent. No doubt influential will have been the statement from Nadeem Zahawi, the Chancellor, saying it's time publicly for the Prime Minister to go. No doubt the resignation of the Education Secretary, Michelle Donnellan, will have weighed heavy on the Prime Minister's mind, having only been appointed to that role 36 hours ago. But also, as I reported very early this morning, 2 men walked into that black door and we haven't seen them leave yet. The Chief Whip, Chris Heaton-Harris, and one of the Prime Minister's closest allies in Cabinet, Nigel Adams, as well. They both walked in very early this morning and no doubt have been having conversations with the Prime Minister. They're 2 people that the Prime Minister trusts. They're used as sounding boards by him, and perhaps it was their words that also weighed heavy on the Prime Minister's mind. Simply looking forward to the next sort of 4 or 5 days before the Tory party could get a vote of no confidence through, those days would seem to be more and more untellable. Entire departments without ministers, the function of government grinding to a halt. It's that has brought this all to a juddering conclusion just this morning. So in a couple of hours now, we'll expect the Prime Minister to make that statement and the game will be over.
Tom, thank you very much indeed. Stay there, keep us posted. Breaking news, obviously, you've heard it here first Boris Johnson to resign today. Matt Goodwin, academic and professor of politics, we were talking about the future of the Conservative Party. You did say he would go today. A lot of people may have doubted that, but it's going to happen.
This is the end of one of the most consequential premierships in contemporary British politics. It's somebody who pulled the country out of the European Union, who overthrew one of the big points of consensus in the country for the last 50 years. To many people, he was a big beacon of hope and promise. To many others, he was divisive and unnecessarily populist and incompetent. But Boris Johnson will go down in the history books, Eamonn, as one of the most consequential prime ministers in recent history.
Matt, leave it there. Interviews and people ready to talk all the time on the programme.
Yeah, joining us now is Conservative MP and former supporter of Boris Johnson, Steve Baker. Good morning to you. This was inevitable, was it not?
Yes, good morning. Well, it was inevitable, but I wasn't able to say that in my last interview just a few minutes ago. So I'm really grateful to Boris Johnson that he does seem to have said that he's going to leave office and stay as caretaker. That, of course, is perfectly acceptable as long as we don't have big changes in policy. And I'm grateful that we can now move on and pick a new leader, which, of course, we're going to have to do at great speed.
Look like, who do you think should be the next leader?
Well, as I've said, I have to think about it seriously. Your viewers will know that in the course of the last 7 out of 12 years I've been an MP, I have actually provided leadership in moments of crisis over Brexit, over COVID, over race relations and indeed over net zero. So I've got to face up to the reality that Conservative home readers routinely put me in the top 10 for next leader, sometimes in the top 5. That's very honouring and I need to take it seriously. So I'm going to reflect on whether I should run.
OK, well, Steve, what made the difference today? What was the straw that broke the camel's back? Because, you know, last night, overnight, we were getting the Prime Minister was defying. He was going to cling on to power. Was it Nadeem Zahawi, that straw that broke the camel's back?
Well, I'm inclined to think that it will have been Ben Wallace this morning. I mean, for Ben to say quite rightly and admirably that he needed to stay in post as Defence Secretary during, of course, the Ukraine war, is absolutely right to have said that. And I admire him for making it clear that he was calling on Boris to go. So, you know, I think that might have been the straw that broke the camel's back. But I'm very confident Boris will have had people around him saying that it was over. It's a pity it's taken overnight.
I just want to clarify that the question I asked you was who do you think should lead the party, and it sounds like you're really considering that that could be you.
Yes, that is the case, yes. And I'm doing that out of respect for Conservative home readers and the many people who I'm afraid, to the disappointment of my critics, are in fact lighting up my phone encouraging me to go for it. You know, people have watched me provide leadership for 7 years, sometimes for up to a third of the Conservative Party, and successfully. You know, people warned we would split the Conservative Party terminally over Brexit. We didn't do that. Colleagues have watched my role in making sure we actually won an 80-seat majority. And colleagues will know that I had a lot to do with getting that. Of course, if Theresa May's deal had gone through, which Boris voted for amongst others, and indeed a number of people in the Cabinet, that would have split the Conservative Party terminally. And it's because I and others stopped it, because I and others persuaded Nigel Farage not to run against incumbents. Because of all of that, we got an 80-seat majority. So it's with huge sadness that we've come to this point. But I have to accept, working-class kid from Cornwall though I may be, that I'm in the extraordinary position of finding serious people asking me to stand, Conservative members putting me in the top 10 or even the top 5. I've got to take it seriously and reflect on it and mean it.
And if you are in the top 10 or even the top 5, we've got to take you seriously as well. What sort of Conservative would you be? We were just talking to a professor of politics there about what is needed for the future, a new type of conservatism, not necessarily harping back. Would you be a man who looks forward?
Absolutely, of course I would. Progress comes in society by taking hold of opportunities, by seizing the moment and by recognising the reality of society, and that's that we're individuals in relationship, and those relationships are at their best when they're voluntary, which means not coerced by the government. And that's what's been going wrong. This great faith in the omnipotence of power to solve every problem is what has been ruining us. The practical outworking of that has got to be lower taxes soon. It's also got to be better, more common law-based regulation now we're out of the EU. It means, for goodness sake, balancing the books. But it also also means, in the long run, being really honest with people that we face the default of the welfare state in our lifetimes, according to the people who do these sums for us. And we need to face up to that and start getting real about energy policy, about tax, about enterprise, and start to create a bigger cake, a bigger pie, so that we can actually meet our pension, healthcare and welfare obligations and allocate scarce resources better. So I want this country to be more prosperous, happier and freer. I want less politics in everyone's lives. I want to see stability. And I have reached the point, after 7 years of providing leadership to my colleagues, that I could do it. I'm very confident if I was in Downing Street this afternoon, I'd form a capable and competent government to deliver the kind of policies I wanted. The big question for me is, can I get there?
He is Steve Baker, and he is running for Prime Minister. And he's certainly going to give it a very deep thought about that, because a lot of people are recommending him to do so. He's going to be a name you're going to hear a lot of in the future. Steve, thanks for your time today. Maybe one day we'll be addressing you as PM. Thank
Potentially.
you.
Right now, 23 minutes past 9. If you've just joined us, the latest, Boris Johnson is resigning as Conservative Party leader. We're expecting him to make a statement outside of Number 10 later on today, potentially this morning. Of course, we'll bring that to you here, but let's get live reaction. Dawn Neeson, former editor of The Daily Star, is here to take us through
I thought The Star had the best headline. It was a photo case book, and he says... he's writing to an agony aunt. Cripes, my work chums say I'm a lying wassock and they're all deserting me. What is it like to walk into a room and believe that, you know, people are talking about you, hating you? And he wasn't going to give in to that pressure last night. He has.
It's an astonishing morning. I don't think I've ever witnessed news events like it. Every time you sort of like put your phone down, it pings with another resignation, another piece of information. But I mean, one of the things that the Telegraph have done this particularly well today. They've got, I think it's like literally a double-page spread picture of Sajid Javid making his speech yesterday, which I think was probably one of the final straws for the Prime Minister. But there's just an amazing picture of everybody in the Cabinet just looking like they were at a funeral. It really was. I mean, this is not just about Boris Johnson, it's just about the future of the Conservative Party. And I think it's very telling. Even Theresa May, who, as we know, is no big fan of Boris, was looking incredibly just depressed.
Dawn,
no other word for it.
The Prime Minister is going to make a statement to the country today.
Yes.
Number 10 have just confirmed that. What's he going to say?
Well, actually, what I think he's going to say, and this might be able to break it, and it's just literally popped up, is that he might be saying that he's going to serve as PM until a successor is elected in the autumn, which means he is going to make an announcement today, but the announcement is that he's staying there for a few more months. And
will be a sort of caretaker until after the summer recess, and then party conference comes through, and then maybe we'd have a new leader then.
Well, the caretaker would be Dominic Raab, wouldn't it? So, I mean, whether that's a good thing, I'd be very interested to see what viewers think, whether that would be a good thing. But it was very interesting listening to Steve Baker just then. In a recent poll, 48% of the Tory party think that Steve would actually be a good PM. So that was very interesting. I thought it was a very, very good CV for a job application there, wasn't it? I mean, it's pretty much hire me. However, the favourite amongst the Conservative Party does appear to be Ben Wallace, who I think, again, what Steve was saying, was another final straw for Boris, because when Ben Wallace is coming out, who's done it pretty, I think we'll agree, a pretty good job, when he came out and sort of like said, like, this is the end, and 72% of Conservative members think he would be a good leader. Interestingly, Penny Mordaunt is still coming in at number 2, so it's
Does Ben
just
Wallace
astonishing.
want the job?
Oh, you know what? At this stage of the game, I think pretty much any of them would fancy their chances, because I think if they are true Conservatives, they want to do it for the party. And I think this is the issue we're at now. I think Boris Johnson was elected, and, you know, constituencies in the north who would never in a million years, you would have thought, vote for the Conservative Party. He did, because of Boris.
Well,
but he didn't deliver the Conservative manifesto that people assumed he would do. Suddenly it was a Green Party.
You're hearing names. Matt's a professor of politics, and you're hearing names, and Steve Baker throwing his hat into the ring there this morning here on this show.
Steve's a contender. He's got a significant following among a section of the party. He's seen as a campaigner. He's seen as someone with courage and who's been, at certain points, has been willing to challenge the consensus. There are many other names, Eamonn, that are now going to come forward. I suspect, actually, this leadership contest is going to be very big, very wide, very broad. There are going to be people on the right, people in the One Nation tradition. There are going to be people who are economically, socially liberal. There are going to be social conservatives, cultural conservatives. And I think, actually, ultimately, this is probably what the party needs. I think it needs to flesh out what kind of party is it? Who does it want to appeal to? Where is it taking Brexit Britain? What is the strategy, not just for the next 2 years, Eamonn, but what's the strategy for the next 10, 20 years? We need to start thinking like some of our competitors in the global world. We need to start thinking like China. We need to start thinking about where are we in 2040, 2050? Where are we going as a country? What's the economic strategy? What is the benefits that we're going to get from Brexit?
But Don, there will be a period of mourning for a lot of people who were Boris Johnson fans, and they're going to feel a bit homeless. They're going to feel who's going to speak for us now that the big man has gone. Can you understand that, how people will feel?
I totally understand that, and I think for many voters who were won over by Boris, and let's face it, the force of his personality. I mean, Boris Johnson walks into the room and you notice him. So many of the resignations we've had over the last 24 hours in particular, and everyone's going, who? I mean, I didn't know who half of them were, to be honest with you. But, I mean, there will be people feeling very sad by this because he came in with this huge personality and people really were sucked in by that, if sucked in is even the right phrase. But he just didn't deliver on the promises that people, I personally think, voted him for. I mean, suddenly the green issues that came in, and it's like no one was going, well, you didn't mention that at the time, so that's not why we voted for you. And, I agree with Matt. The Conservative Party now needs to get back to the Conservative values. I mean, sort of like, low taxes. I mean, we've got the highest taxes in 70 years. I mean, the migration problem. People try and brush that under the carpet, but it is an issue for a lot of Conservative voters who voted for Boris to sort this problem out, and it still hasn't been sorted out.
And right now the question will be what the Conservative Party looks like. If you've just joined us, Boris Johnson is resigning as the Conservative Party leader. He's going to make a statement today. That's all Downing Street have told us. Of course, when that happens, we'll bring it to you here on GB News. That's live footage we're showing you now of the door of number 10. What conversations are going on behind that door? I'm sure we all want to know. Very shortly, we'll be live there for Tom Harwood's programme, The Briefing. Just sum up for us, Dawn, what is Boris Johnson's legacy going to be?
I think people will always associate Boris with Brexit. I think it's like, it's not quite over the line. We all know that. As Ireland, as you were talking about earlier on, the Northern Ireland Protocol is still a problem. But I think, he did achieve an amazing thing there with getting Brexit pretty much sorted. And I think, and seeing off, the far left Labour anti-Semitic threat, I think that was a big issue as well. So, and then obviously the other cliche, the vaccine rollout. And every time Boris is on the fence, he always mentions those three things, doesn't he? So.
Don, thank you. Got to leave it there. Don Neeson, Matt Goodwin, thank you both very much indeed. Well, that's it on this Thursday morning, Thursday the 7th of July, the day that Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister, resigns. He will be making a statement live. We'll cover it here on GB News at some time today. We have not had a time on that, but keep it here on GB News all day. We're going now live to our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, who is there in the thick of the action at Downing Street. Thanks for watching. Tom, over to you.
Well, what a momentous day, Eamonn. It was June 2019 when Boris Johnson became Prime Minister, became leader of the Conservative Party, and it's the 7th of July 2022, the day that he ceases to be leader of the Conservative Party. We'll have full analysis over the next half hour. You're watching The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, live from Downing Street. It's just gone 9:30, and for the next half an hour we'll have full analysis and indeed we'll be looking ahead towards what happens next with this momentous decision by the Prime Minister to stand down as Conservative Party leader. Of course, the next steps are fairly clear. There will be a Conservative Party leadership election. The Prime Minister will attempt to stay on as Prime Minister, as a caretaker Prime Prime Minister through the process of that leadership election. Will he be able to? Will his MPs allow that situation to take place? Is this perhaps a compromise that the Prime Minister remains in post throughout perhaps a protracted leadership election lasting this summer? Well, these are questions that remain to be answered. Let's turn now to Lord Hayward, a Conservative peer and expert on polling, who managed to get the last Conservative leadership election pretty much nailed on. Lord Hayward, you are a numbers man. You read the runes in a very, very good way, I suppose. What is your feeling for how this leadership election that is now, well, let's be frank, that has been sort of rumbling on in the shadows for some time now, how is this going to play out over the next few days?
I think the first difficulty one faces is you've got the announcement at last, and I think many people sadly will take the view that the Conservative MPs have been united by Boris's unwillingness to go. So they'll be pleased about the announcement, but the key question will have to be whether they're willing to let him to continue as acting Prime Minister until a new leadership election is completed. So many of the ministers have resigned saying you lack integrity, etc., that I think there will be a fair amount of pressure to say, look, Dominic Raab as Deputy Prime Minister should actually take over and that Boris should not continue.
Is the fact that the Prime Minister is making a statement today, is not running this to the very end, is not waiting for a potential rule change of the 1922 committee, would that perhaps assuage some of his critics? Perhaps this is a compromise position that he is putting out there, that he presides, because of course Parliament is not sitting for very much longer. Most of the next of the coming months will indeed be recess. Does the Prime Minister being in situ for that period perhaps mean it's more likely?
I think it's slightly more likely, but I think there will be pressure. There'll be those who say, well, actually, he's taken so long that there's no justification for a compromise. He will argue, as will some of his aides, that it should be right that he continues. But just because Parliament's in recess doesn't mean that government doesn't go on. We've had the statement from Ben Wallace, Priti Patel, etc., saying that we have to continue in office because something has to happen in terms of security, policing, etc. If you look at education, you face the position whereby there will be announcements in relation to all sorts of aspects of education policy, results run up to the new educational terms. So I think it's going to be a difficult decision for MPs to take, and I think there will be a lot of discussion going on, and I think a fair amount of pressure saying, look, we've resigned because we used the word because we felt you didn't have integrity. It's very difficult for us to come back into a government under those circumstances, and that will probably be the next dividing line in the next 24, 48 hours.
Yes, I suppose this is very messy now. Of course, no one's expecting that a new Prime Minister can come in any short order. Whatever happens, there will be a protracted leadership contest. And so, with that in mind, how do these gaps in the ministerial ranks, how do these gaps, frankly, in the cabinet get filled? Is it possible to simply press the reset button, take everything back 3 days' time, and pretend none of this really happened?
I think that's a serious possibility. I would be astonished if most of the vast majority of the ministers said no. I think they'll say yes, that would be a sensible process for operation in association with Dominic Raab as acting Prime Minister. I think that's would be a good compromise because, as you say, the leadership election is going to be protracted at a point when Parliament is not sitting. So this is one aspect of running the Tory party which will be very difficult. And particularly, we know that a fair number of potential candidates have been preparing their campaigns for a while. It will just now mean that they come out into the open.
Well, let's talk about those potential candidates and indeed those campaigns, because I suppose we'll start to expect to see the start of this leadership contest really beginning today, perhaps in parliamentary terms, the start of it as soon as next Tuesday perhaps. Back in 2019, the 1922 committee set the rules that every Tuesday and Thursday there would be a vote, whittling down the number of candidates until they get to just 2 that then go out to the membership. Lord Hayward, who do you expect to be the leading players in this contest?
I think it's very difficult to be sure. As you indicated, the candidates could come out. We've already had Suella Braverman last night saying that she would be putting her hat into the ring. Steve Baker's indicated that he might consider it, although he has said that since he lacks ministerial experience, he's not sure whether he would do so. The more obvious ones are people like Liz Truss, Ben Wallace, Rishi Sunak, Penny Mordaunt. There's a fairly long list of people who will give very serious consideration to their position and almost certainly put their hat into the ring. Tom Tugendhat, Jeremy Hunt, for example.
And when it comes to those who are credibly going to get into that final 2, I suppose we'll get some people who are seen to be closer to Boris in sort of one camp and some people who have been longer critics of Boris in the other camp. Perhaps these are the 2 camps that may well make it into that final round and face the Prime Minister. I suppose the frontrunners in this sphere are going to be people like Rishi Sunak, Nadeem Zahawi, Liz Truss, and potentially that is our field.
It could come down to that, but the Tory party has a history of surprise leaderships. Boris is very much the exception over the last century. Nearly every other Tory party leader was somebody who was not considered the favourite at the start of the process. So I think in Nadeem Zahawi's case, he's probably damaged his position somewhat in the last 48 hours. So I think he is probably less likely. But you're absolutely right that there will be somebody who is possibly closer to Boris and somebody who is possibly not. I would expect the winning candidate to be a Brexiteer, but somebody who is perceived as being good in terms of reaching out across the range of MPs. But the mood has changed, is changing very rapidly because of the experiences of the last 72 hours.
Well, it will be fascinating to watch. Of course, all of this is starting to play out as we speak. Lord Hayward, thank you so much for joining us this morning on The Briefing. Really fascinating analysis there. Well, of course, I'm standing here in Downing Street, and I have to say I'm keeping sort of watching over my shoulder. Might there be a lectern put out on the street? We will bring you, of course, all the developments as they happen on this street. But now let's turn to Uxbridge, the Prime Minister's constituency, where our London reporter Alice Porter is, and she's been talking to people on the ground there in Uxbridge. Alice, what's the mood where you are?
Hello there, good morning. Well, what a 24 hours it's been. I was here in Uxbridge yesterday when there were 2 resignations, and my goodness me, we've now got Boris Johnson resigning as well. Extraordinary 24 hours, and what does that mean to the people in Uxbridge and Ruislip, which has been his constituency, as he's their constituency MP. Now, I'm joined by Nick Johnson. Now, Nick, you're a resident here. You've been living here for over 50 years. I mean, what's your response to what we've seen over the last 24 hours?
Well, I think given the events of the last few hours, it's inevitable that Boris Johnson would step down as Prime Minister. For us in Uxbridge, it's going to be very interesting now to see whether we get a constituency MP back. Because the big problem, if your MP is also in a high position such as Prime Minister, they haven't got the time to devote to local matters. And we saw the situation with the Southend MP who was tragically killed. It came out that he was a very, very good constituency MP. Any local issue he got to grips with, he got it sorted. The problem we have here in Uxbridge, we have some important local issues, and Boris Johnson hasn't got the time, and I think sometimes hasn't got the inclination to get them sorted for us. So it's going to be very interesting now, if he reverts to the back benches, whether he will now have time to sort out some of the major problems here in Uxbridge.
Because a lot of people today, quite rightly so, will be looking at the Prime Minister in terms of sort of the national politics, but it's important to stress, he is still and would continue to be the MP for Uxbridge and Ruislip. I mean, what have your experience been with Boris Johnson? You've met him a couple of times when he's come to Uxbridge. I mean, what's he been like?
He's an interesting person. I've met him a number of occasions on various issues. I think at times he will say yes because he wants you to hear him say yes. He doesn't always follow things through. We have a particular issue here with our police station. We have a modern police station in the centre of the town. Sadiq Khan has partially closed it. He's closed the 24/7 front counter. He's closed the cell block, and the whole station is under threat. We've been pushing Boris Johnson to meet with Sadiq Khan to sort this out, and he hasn't met with Sadiq Khan. He stood with us outside the police station and had his picture taken, and says he supports the campaign, but we want an MP who can actually take action and sort out local issues. We need our police station. It's an important building, and certainly now with the crime levels they are and the move towards better neighbourhood policing, you've got to have a good local facility. Sadiq Khan wants to close it, sell off the site and move everything to Hayes End, which is a much older building, not fit for purpose, totally in the wrong place. And the local council, to their credit, the local Conservative council here has offered to buy Uxbridge Police Station and rent it back to the Metropolitan Police at a reasonable rent, and also pay half the running costs for 5 years. Sadiq Khan won't accept that. We are stuck in a political maelstrom between Labour and Conservative and personalities. I want Boris Johnson now to act as a local MP, sort this out. This has got to be his local constituency crusade. His majority at the moment is only just over 7,000, and the latest polls indicate that he would lose the seat if there was a general election. So he's got to sort out local problems to prove to people that he's worthy as being a successor to continue to serve Uxbridge, if he wants to remain MP, of course.
Well, look, Nick, thank you so much for speaking to me today. I think it's important to get a flavour there of Boris Johnson, not just as a Prime Minister, but also as a local MP, which he would continue to stay, despite the news that we've heard in the last half hour.
Really interesting there to speculate on the Prime Minister's post-Prime Ministerial career. Will he be David Cameron, scarpering off within a matter of months and calling a by-election? Or will he be a Theresa May and stick around for some time? I suppose that's all to be seen. But Alice Porter, thank you for that update there from Uxbridge and Ruislip. Well, we can now be joined from outside Parliament by Andrew Bowie, the Scottish Conservative MP, I should say, for Aberdeenshire South and Kilcarden, I believe. Andrew Bowie, thank you so much for joining us this morning. What a day it's turning out to be. You yourself voted no confidence in the Prime Minister around a month ago. Do you feel vindicated this morning?
Yeah, I do actually, Tom. The Prime Minister 4 weeks ago suffered the worst result in a confidence vote in leader of the Conservative Party that we've ever seen, worse than Theresa May, worse than John Major, and even worse than Margaret Thatcher. So I think he should have looked then at whether it was sustainable for him to carry on in Downing Street. So I am glad that finally he's done the right thing. He's accepted that he cannot govern effectively when so many ministers are either telling him to resign or indeed resigning themselves. And now I hope that this leadership election can be expedited quickly and we can move on, bring the party together, bring the country together and start governing given the huge issues that we face across the country.
You might very well hope that this can be done quickly and cleanly. However, all the evidence looks like it will be precisely the opposite. There is no clear successor. One of the things that kept Boris Johnson in post for such a long time after the scandals and the various rigmarole of all of this circus really began 6 or so months ago, one of the things keeping the Prime Minister in place was the fact that there is no natural successor, that this will likely be a fairly messy leadership election. Andrew Bowie, you've been being wined and dined and even gone out for drinks with various leadership candidates, or potential candidates, I should say, as they've been trying to butter up key figures in the Conservative Party. What's your view on how many candidates are going to stand and whether you're leaning towards anyone in particular?
Look, Tom, we simply don't know who's going to stand or indeed what they're standing on. The Prime Minister has, within the last hour only, declared his intention to move on from Downing Street. I think that there will be a number of candidates, and we are lucky in the Conservative Party that we have so many able candidates for the job, or we will have so many able candidates for this job. We've got so many issues facing us within this country and indeed around the world. So I think that we'll be blessed with whoever comes in. I've said before on your show, Tom, I don't like to get in the predictions game, but everybody thought it was going to be a messy and long drawn-out process when David Cameron resigned. Obviously that was fixed within 3 weeks. We had a Prime Minister in Downing Street, and even the last leadership election, it only took 4 to 5 weeks going to the membership of the party in the country to see Theresa May leave and Boris Johnson in Downing Street. So there's no reason that this needs to be long and drawn out. It would be to the detriment of the party and therefore to the detriment of the country if it was. So I would ask all colleagues to bear that in mind as we move forward through the process of the next few weeks.
Well, the Prime Minister will resign as leader of the Conservative Party today. We understand he will really say that he wants to stay on as Prime Minister through this leadership contest. Andrew Bowie, as someone who has opposed this Prime Minister in the last few months, what is your view as to whether he is the right person to stay on as Prime Minister until a successor can be found? A number of your colleagues mulling over the possibility that instead an interim Prime Minister is found and Boris Johnson should resign immediately both roles.
Look, Tom, the Prime Minister has finally done a decent thing, and he has resigned. He's resigning as leader of the Conservative Party. Do I think it would be better if we had an interim leader in place as we go through this process? Probably, given the division and the bitterness that is in the Parliamentary Conservative Party at the minute as a result of what's gone on. But the fact is we've got to this stage. The Prime Minister will be leaving Downing Street. We will have a new leader and a new Prime Minister, hopefully within a matter of weeks. So in terms of should he stay on, I think that's immaterial. He will be leaving his position as leader of the Conservative Party. The country will have a new Prime Minister within a matter of weeks, and I think that's what we should be focusing on today.
Well, Andrew Bowie, thank you so much for your thoughts there. Really interesting to explore what exactly is going to happen next and the divisions that still are laid bare within the Conservative Party. Andrew Bowie there, Conservative MP, former Vice Chair of the Conservative Party, of course. Well, I am standing here in Downing Street, and I have to say that the press pen here opposite number 10, opposite number 11 as well, is absolutely packed. I have almost never seen it quite so busy here. I wonder if we could actually pan the camera around to have a look at just how many people are standing here, how busy it has become. This is really turning into a very momentous day here in Downing Street, and indeed we're expecting the Prime Minister to make a statement in a matter of hours. We don't have direct guidance on the timing of that. We understand the Prime Minister is crafting a statement in the building behind me now. But crucially, the question is, will the party accept now the Prime Minister remaining in post as Prime Minister until a new one can be found? This is, to some extent, a compromise statement that we're expecting. Resignation as party leader, but remaining as Prime Minister until the conclusion of a leadership contest. Now, that could be a difficult pill to swallow for many in the party, many people who have been resigning, many people who have lost confidence in Boris Johnson in so many ways, because, of course, the last leadership election took more than 40 days to conclude. Well, could the Conservative Party that has behaved so bitterly towards this Prime Minister, could they countenance him remaining as Prime Minister for a further 40 days if indeed the process matches the way it worked in 2019? I suppose that is a question. However, listening there to the words of Andrew Bowie, someone who has not been a fan of this Prime Minister, perhaps there will now be this release, this moment of catharsis within the parliamentary Conservative Party, this idea that because the Prime Minister has set out this timetable for departure, because he is resigning as party leader, perhaps that will be enough, and perhaps this will be the beginning of the Conservative Party putting itself back together again. Although it's easy to overemphasise the divisions within the Conservative Party, to some extent the last 2 days have shown a rather more united Conservative Party than one might have expected, just united in their opposition to this Prime Minister. Perhaps in that way he did unite the Tory Party after all. Well, I'm delighted to say now that we can be joined outside Parliament by Robin Walker, MP. Welcome very much to the show. I suppose the big question we all have to ask is what happens next? Who are you expecting to stand to be the next leader of the Conservative Party?
Well, I think there are a number of people who are likely to put their hat into the ring. I want to see a strong field, and I want to see a good choice for colleagues. But importantly, I think what we all want is to make sure that we can deliver on that 2019 manifesto on which we were elected. So I'll be testing the various candidates on how they plan to do that, how they can make sure that we can deliver tax cuts, we can grow the economy, we can support businesses, but we can also do so in a way that allows for the investment in our public services, our NHS, our schools, where I've been the Minister for the last 10 months, and I'm determined that we deliver for them. So there's some huge challenges, some huge opportunities for our party, but most of all, there's a palpable sense of relief today in Westminster that the Prime Minister has accepted that the writing is on the wall, that he's accepted that he does need to step down both as leader of the party and Prime Minister, and now we can go on, we can have that contest and we can move forward. I think that's good news all round, and I have to say it took a bit of time and it took a bit of effort getting there, but I think it's been worthwhile.
I have to say, speaking to so many of your colleagues, it does seem that perhaps it wasn't the big media obsession with parties that in the end convinced MPs that really the time of this Prime Minister was up, but more issues perhaps of competence, of how Number 10 was run, and indeed, as you mentioned there, the 2019 manifesto, the number of U-turns that this government has performed. I wonder if it now seems inevitable that those manifesto-breaking U-turns might themselves be U-turned upon. Might we see a ditching of the national insurance tax hike? Might we see a ditching of the corporation tax hike planned? Might we see a return to a more conservative form of government, moving away from the historically high tax burden we've seen under this premiership?
Well, I think one of the things that the party is united on is wanting to see the burden of taxation lifted, wanting to make sure that we can cut taxes, both for ordinary working people and for businesses. And I think we need to work hard to make sure we can achieve that. But we're doing it in an incredibly difficult fiscal context. And it is right as well that the debate will be raging about how you strike that right balance between cutting people's taxes, leaving more money in the pocket of the taxpayer and to support businesses to invest, whilst also maintaining another fundamental Conservative principle of fiscal discipline. So these are huge challenges, and I absolutely support my former boss Nadeem Zahawi in being able to take some of these on as Chancellor. I think what he set out on day one is a positive approach, making sure that we do focus on relieving the burden of taxation first and foremost. But most of all, the issue I think that many of us had with the Prime Minister, the issue that I discussed with him indeed when he ran to become Prime Minister in the first place, is trust. And he won the trust of many colleagues by campaigning so effectively, by being a great leader to take us into an election in 2019, and by winning that majority. Unfortunately, over a long period of time, that trust has been undermined by events at Number 10 and the way in which they have been handled. And Partygate was one element of that. But of course, the issue there is many of us were prepared to engage, to raise our concerns, and to hear that they were being addressed, to give him another chance to prove that he could learn and he could listen. Unfortunately, what we saw over the last few weeks is that listening and learning hadn't really taken place, the attitude hadn't changed, and that's why I think the trust broke down. I think he did have to go. That doesn't undermine the fact that this is a Prime Minister with phenomenal achievements to his name. He delivered Brexit with a deal when many people thought that was completely impossible. He defeated Jeremy Corbyn spectacularly in the 2019 election, and he saw this country through an incredibly difficult time with the pandemic, and for all the challenges and some of the problems that took place during that time, he showed real leadership, both in seeing us through the pandemic, supporting the economy through that period, but crucially also in ending lockdown and in taking us out of it when many other politicians would not have done. So I think he deserves great credit for these things, and we should, as he comes to the end of his premiership, we should be celebrating some of his achievements, but making sure actually we get leadership which can take our party forward. And I think a number of people in recent days have shown that leadership. I think Sajid Javid's resignation, which was the catalyst for a lot of this, has shown real leadership, and when he spoke yesterday about integrity, I think he reached through to a lot of people in the party. But I want to see a strong field emerge. I want to see a strong contest, and I think all of these ideas will be tested as part of that contest in the weeks to come.
It is so interesting. The Conservative Party has this reputation for being